All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here this morning. And I'm glad that you went over how you're going to use the questions because fortunately that's how we built our presentation. It was pretty much tracking along with those questions. So hopefully we'll be able to click those off as we go through our presentation. So I'm going to spend a little time telling you about who we are, why we've assembled this team, how we engage the community in our process, in our design and planning process. A lot of the answers to your questions will be in the form of relevant projects. So we've got, what are we, 150 slides now?
Yeah, we whittled it down.
Yeah, we whittled it down. So we've got a lot of information we want to share with you. And then if we haven't hit on anything at the end, certainly want you to ask more questions. And I also want you to ask questions while we're going through. We want this to be a dialogue and not just a presentation. We prefer those types of interactions. So starting off, who are we and why did we want to pursue this project? So I'll tell you about who I am. I'm a principal with Confluence. My name is Terry Burke-Bickler. I'll let everyone introduce themselves in a minute. When we heard about this project, we immediately reached out to the folks that we've partnered with on similar projects of importance before. And we say it's a best-in-class team, and we mean that. As you all probably experience in work, you toil on a lot of things for a long time, and then you make the decisions in the last 10 minutes and go with it. Well, so we spent the last several weeks putting together our ideas, getting ready for this interview, and then got together yesterday and today here in Garden City, and seeing us around the table working together and dialoguing the way we do, it really reinforced for me that this is the right team. We've all worked together on a number of projects that you'll see, and we think this really is the best team for the project to help you make some smart decisions. BRS Architects, world-class architecture, really focuses on community rec type architecture. We've started partnering with them about 10 years ago, and it's been a great relationship ever since. WTI, same time, same project. We'll show you in a lathe that we did together, and that has led to multiple additional projects. And then Ballard King and Associates, worked with them. Well, I met Ken Ballard many years ago at a different firm when we were doing some senior center work, but have continued that relationship on a whole range of parks and recreation projects. And we really feel like this team, we've got the comprehensive services that you need to answer the questions that you have in front of you. Not only from a kind of how does this fit in the park and in the community standpoint, that's where we come in. It's not often that a landscape architect would lead a team of this size and of this type on this type of project. We do that quite frequently. We're not scared of it, I guess you could say. We like that challenge. We like the impact that these projects have on the quality of life in communities. So we really start from the outside in, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But when we looked at, who are the best folks to help us with aquatics, with architecture, and then also to make sure you're making smart decisions, is this even feasible? What is the right thing to do? What's the right size? What are the right features? How much can we charge? Should we charge? All of those questions you're going to have to answer beyond just how do we pay for it. That's where Ballard King really excels. And everybody will tell you a little bit about their experience. So I'm going to let each one introduce themselves, and then we'll tell you about our firm. So Doug?
Hello everyone, my name is Doug Whitaker with Water Technology. It's great to be here, and I've had a passion for aquatics design since I was 6 years old and started swimming competitively. And I actually was in the forefront of this business. My father was one of the first principals at WTI. So I've been in the aquatics design and construction business for over 40 years. So it was really fun to see the morphing from a competition pool to a much more comprehensive multi-generational appeal type pool. So it's exciting to be here, and we're going to share that passion for some of the designs that we've shown you today.
I'm Jen Gerber, Water Technology, and like Doug, his excitement is just unmatched. And I think that's what Water Tech brings to the table. We do projects all over the world, and we love what we do. We have a whole group of passionate professionals, just like Doug, from designers to architects to engineers. And I've been with Water Technology since college, and it's my favorite place in the world, and every day is different, and we love that every day is different, and we're passionate about being able to work with communities like you, and that's my favorite part of my job. I love getting to know a community and coming back years later and seeing how that was impacted and really building that relationship.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jeff King with Ballard King and Associates. Good morning, and it's great to be here. You're getting kind of on the experienced end of the table here between Dave and I. We happen to go way back, but I think one of the points I want to make about Ballard King and Associates that I think really differentiate us, and we've enjoyed a strategic partnership with all the folks sitting up here. But the foundation of our consulting practice was built around operational experience. I was in the park and recreation industry for 27 years, so I've operated some facilities that size-wise are similar as what you see today. The last facility I operated happened to be in the St. Louis market. It was a 146,000 square foot center, had a 50-meter indoor pool, 10-meter diving tower, 2 ice skating rinks, 2 gymnasiums, elevated jog track, fitness component. And the unique thing about that was we were an enterprise fund, so we had to generate enough revenue to offset all of our expenses. Not the capital side, but just on the operational side. So we bring that level of experience to this process.
Excuse me, Jeff's being a little modest because whenever a facility runs into problems, they oftentimes ask Ballard King to come in and kind of actually operate that facility for a few weeks,
Yes.
or it turns into months, and
Correct.
get them back on track. So he has very extensive operational knowledge that a lot of people across the country really appreciate and understand.
So, hi, I'm Dave Hamill with Barker Rinker Seacat, an architect and principal there. I've been with the firm for 42 years, so I've got a lot of depth of experience. Really, the last 25 years, our firm has focused almost primarily on community recreation and doing lots of outdoor pools, indoor pools, community pools, senior centers, comprehensive big recreation centers with indoor pools, as well as outdoor components. So I think we bring the breadth of that kind of experience to you. And we're really excited about being here and the big pool. We went and visited that for the first time, and I was so impressed with what a cool place that is. So I understand how that has got a lot of sentimental value to everyone in the community, and it would be hard to say goodbye to it. But we certainly, after viewing it, certainly see that there were some shortcomings that could be improved for sure. But talk about an iconic facility, it's really cool.
Yeah, the big pool. It's right. And again, I'm Terry. For me, my water roots maybe don't go back as far as Doug's, but I do remember the days of being a bag boy for a couple of years and being a lifeguard. And I wasn't a good swimmer. I just kind of sat there twirling the whistle and showing off my perm mullet back in the 80s. And yes, I had a perm mullet. I just said that on TV. My wife will never let me do that again. And I also want to answer the question you're probably thinking, none of these people were in the proposal. Well, some of us were. But scheduling is what it is, and it's that time of year, people have vacations and all of that. But I think what I want to impress upon you is that what you still have here is leadership from every one of our team members. Even though they might not have been the person in the proposal, they have equal or more experience than those folks and all bring the same amount of passion. And even among our teams, but within our internal offices, we all are very collaborative. It's just the nature of the game today. So if that was a question in anyone's mind, I just wanted to address that. So a little bit about Confluence. We won't dwell on this, but just so you don't, for those that don't know, we are a firm that's, my office is in Kansas City. Our home base is in Des Moines, Iowa. We have 6 offices now. We're in Omaha, Minneapolis, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We're trying to own the middle of the country as best we can. We're landscape architects and planners. That's all we do. We don't practice architecture. We're not engineers. We partner strategically with the best talent, and once we build those relationships, we keep them, similar to with our clients. Over that time, when I started with the firm in 2003, I think there were 13 of us. We have reached over 50, which is an interesting threshold from a HR standpoint. But we're getting through that, and we're continuing to grow. We're young in terms of leadership and a firm, and we are very growth-minded. We're very energetic. We have a huge portfolio of Parks and Rec work, and it's fun. It's fun work. I mean, who doesn't? It's much better than working on jails and courthouses.
So back to Barker Rinker Seacat. We've been in business continuously for over 44 years. We've got over 100 built facilities around the country. You know, we started in the Denver, Colorado area. We did a number of centers in that region, and one community would go, oh, look what they did. We need to have something like that, and it just multiplied across the whole Front Range of Colorado. And then it's gone national, and now we've got projects all over the country. We've got over 40 professionals in the office to back us up, and almost all of them are well-seasoned community and recreation focused talent. So a few examples of some of our work. And then we've built over 29 outdoor facilities in the orange, as you can see, and then over 250 nationwide. A lot of them are studies, but many of them are also built facilities, but we've done work all across the country.
So a little bit more about water technology. We're one of the largest aquatic design firms in the nation, and we have people all over the country, and a number of us joke that our home base is on an airplane getting to projects or behind the windshield getting to projects. And we have over 55 professional staff, and just this year it went from 55 to 60. So we've also been experiencing some of that rapid growth. That rapid growth comes on because of the over 150 aquatic projects that we do every year. So we find that it can be any type of project. The only thing that we focus on is aquatics, but whether it's a university, a K through 12 facility, or it's a community recreation center, they all share a little bit in common when it comes to aquatics planning, design, and engineering, and that's what we specialize in. So 80% of our staff has been with WTI in excess of 5 years. So I think that though we have this great growth, we also have a group of people that are committed, that would bleed water technology blue, and are committed to seeing projects through to completion and building those long-term relationships. We do have licensed staff in all 50 states, and we do work all over the US, in Canada, Mexico, internationally. So we find that keeps us on the edge of what's coming. We have people all over the world that are going to be seeing what's happening in Europe and help us figure out ways that we can bring that to the US. So the breadth and depth of our capabilities is just a really simple pie chart, but you can see that public facilities is always going to be the bread and butter of what we do, whether that's an outdoor pool or community recreation center or a community competition facility. That's going to be the bulk of our clients. However, we do a lot of faith-based facilities like Croc centers, YMCAs, JCCs, aquatic water playgrounds, resorts and hotels. We do a little bit of everything, and we think that because we see and touch everything, we're better in all things. That trend forecasting really helps us because we're working on big, large-scale water parks and large resort hotels. We understand what's important for users to make a memorable experience, and we work to find a way to incorporate that into municipal environments.
So, summing that up in numbers, not to brag, it's really more of a reflection for us, I think, because you get so busy doing your work, but once in a while when somebody says, how many of these have you done? You start looking back, and it can be, it's a proud moment, but it can also be a little bit overwhelming to think, wow, that's been a lot, and have we enjoyed all of those? Yes, we have. Have we taken the time to celebrate when we can? So Confluence, over 150 parks and recreation facilities that we've planned, designed, and or built throughout our network of offices. BRS, as Dave mentioned, over 250 facilities designed and built. WTI, just a couple more, 3,500. Aquatic facilities, as Jim mentioned, all over the world. And Ballard King at 700 rec facilities, operations and maintenance plans and studies. Total that up, that's over 4,600 facilities that this group has been involved with, either designing, constructing, and or operating. And that is unmatched. That's a depth of experience that we can bring to you that nobody else will be able to meet. So it is something to spend some time thinking about. I want to transition a little bit. We're going to spend some time talking about our approach. You requested a preliminary design phase scope, so I'm going to talk mainly about that first part at just a high level. So the design process really starts with kind of program development and confirmation. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we get input from the community. You all have done a great job already of getting that ball rolling. So we have a lot of good information that helped inform the concept that we had presented to you. So kudos to you for that. But there's a long way to go, and there are still other conversations to have. So there's program validation that will occur, and then we begin to taking this concept or other concepts and teasing those out a little more. Adding more detail. We'll talk a little bit about even ideas that we have that can improve what you see in front of you today. And then starting to identify rough order of magnitude costs that go beyond the numbers that we submitted, that get into the more detailed elements of site costs, things like that. There are some of those things we just don't have enough information to price right now. But as we get our team moving and get boots on the ground here, we'll be able to fill in some of those blanks. And then what was included in our scope, it wasn't really a direct request, was the ad service of a feasibility and operational study. And that's why we decided, you know what, we need to get Jeff and his team on board. Because regardless of how great the facility looks on paper and how much it might cost to build, if you can't afford to operate it, then we talked about what would be the worst failure, that would be the worst failure. Tear out something that is really meaningful for people, build something new and shiny, and then 2 to 3 years in find out that it's a financial disaster. And we want to help you avoid that to the best extent that we can. So this, we think, is an important step that needs to occur. And then ultimately, when we knock on wood, determine that it is feasible and something does make good sense, then we move into final design and construction. One thing that we may want to have a conversation about is a preferred procurement method. So I don't know if you guys have done design build or anything like that out here yet in Garden City, but we're seeing more and more design build where you would have a contractor-led team, potentially. So we could even introduce that into the process after preliminary design. Some communities find that to be beneficial from a time and cost saving standpoint, or at least cost control. Another method might be construction manager, similar. However, we are still contracted directly with you, the city, and the contractor is directly contracted with you. So we feel on the design side, it allows you to retain more design leverage and design direction as opposed to filtering through the contractor. Won't go into all that now, but that may be a conversation we want to have.
Yeah, I was curious, what is your feeling on that? Do you guys have a preferred process?
So part of the discussion that we've had is maybe like a construction manager at risk, because we've been doing that with our zoo projects, and I think that those that have been involved in that process feel like it's been successful, and also helps, like you said, keep some control in our court and allows us to have a voice at every stage. So the commission themselves have not decided that on this particular project, but we have done that on some others. So
Okay.
I think it just kind of depends on where the commission comes in.
Yeah, and you may not be so time sensitive yet in terms of schedule. That's one reason folks will go to that, but it does put a little more of the onus for cost control onto the contractor that way, as opposed to the standard design bid build. So it can have its benefits as well.
As you can see, our team has a lot of experience in that delivery method, and that's the selected approach.
Yep. And then I'm going to expand on the schematic design phase just a little bit. It is an iterative process. It's not like it's a straight point A to point B. Sorry for the engineers in the room. We are going to go back and forth a little bit, but that's how the best designs are evolved. We think define and prioritize, evaluate costs. Well, too expensive, let's go back and reprioritize. We're getting there, and then ultimately we refine and make some final decisions and move forward with the next phase of feasibility and then ultimately final design. And we like that iterative process. We're not afraid of it. And some folks, quite frankly, don't work well in that environment. And that's part of where we, as your trusted advisors, we bring your team along through that process and make sure that the personalities at the table are comfortable. We don't want to force people into decisions. We want them to have the time to analyze. Some folks are analytical, some folks aren't. We want to make sure we're hitting all those kind of temperamental needs. Engaging the community, as I said, you've already started. The survey is a great start. You're engaging them on social media. It's been interesting to watch the chatter on the Facebook page. Quite frankly, we've never seen it done that way. Scary, yes, But interesting, yes, and so it's helped us prepare for today, so I think that's good. But as we refine and move forward, there's more conversations to have. And we engage the community in a number of ways, whether it's the staff, city leaders, just residents, other key stakeholders, competitive swimmers, all of those groups. Competitive swimmers, wow, what a group. You want to get some action. You want to get some input. But really the goal here is to take the participants in the process, engage them in a meaningful conversation, and the thought is that we convert them into advocates. So maybe they're on the fence, but because they've had a say a lot of times, that turns folks into advocates. So if you have to go out to some sort of referendum for funding or anything like that, or simply to get support for replacing this icon in the community, you can build a stable of advocates that can help you spread that message into the community.
And then, and as Terry was talking about, that public input is very important. And competitive swimming groups, they're very vocal and very forceful. But they're the kind of the vocal minority. The kind of the passive majority are the users that come up and enjoy it every day with their families and things of that nature. Use it for their water exercise programs. Those are the people we really also want to reach out to get their input so that it becomes multi-generational and has that, maximize the appeal, so it maximizes participation.
And I think in addition to that, we're also going to be able to provide for you some statistical analysis. So you're going to be hearing all this public input, but there'll be some statistical analysis and data that you can measure that against as we go through the process
absolutely.
as well.
And that is important to remind you is that our process is, it's a three-pronged stool. It's data-driven, it's community-driven, and then it's kind of from a technical viability standpoint. Those are the things we'll be really balancing. Dave, who would you say the most vocal groups are in rec projects? Competitive swimmers?
Yeah.
Next, theater?
Seniors.
Seniors, pickleball now. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times the seniors are kind of on the negative side until they understand the benefits to them.
Yeah.
And then they're not easily converted, but they do, once they do make that conversion to, hey, this is a great thing for me and my age group, let's get the community behind it.
And they vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's any number of ways, but more and more, it sounds weird, more and more we're doing fewer and fewer public meetings. We're going to where people are as opposed to invited. People have too many things going on. So we try to find opportunities. We can do poolside outreach. We can do things at any kind of festivals or events that might be coming up during the process. So our goal is to do what we can to get the most input possible, and a public meeting isn't always the best way to do that. And then real brief on timeline, we've mapped out, this is essentially what was in the proposal or in the cover letter, about a 4.5, 5 month period to do this initial phase. Just making a arbitrary assumption of a July start date. We could wrap that up by the end of the year. But that really depends on when we get started. It typically depends more on when you're able to, really mobilize your team. And when we can get people on schedule here. It's not usually on our side of the table in terms of the process and turnaround. And that's just natural. Like I said, people are busy. So when you can get everyone together, because we'll identify for you when those critical decision points are, and we'll need to make sure we have the people there to make those decisions. Otherwise, it's worth sliding a week to get the right people in the room. Ultimately, what we're after is a balance of all programmatic, schedule, and budgetary needs that go into a project. That's how you really benefit. If any one of those gets too far out of whack, it can just run the whole project off the rails, and we want to avoid that. So that's where we come in, is to help you kind of manage that balance of those three legs.
So some of the past success, you can see these are complicated issues. There's the facility qualities, it talks about all the components in that category. It's the community users, how they're gonna recreate and have the watertainment and use this for programs. The schedules, how do you schedule all the different types of user groups in a component? And then the facility planning, it's really important for how efficient it's gonna be, how the bathrooms work. No one wants to go to an aquatic center and go into the restroom and have water on the floor. Those are the types of things little things that are overlooked that are very important. How we conserve water and energy in these facilities. I know that sounds weird to talk about with a aquatic facility, but it's very possible to operate in a much more cost-effective manner.
And then bringing that all together to really create that signature facility for your community. A key part of that is partnerships. You know, you guys have already started that discussion or started that with talking to Holcomb, which, is anyone here from Holcomb today? You're the Holcomb guy.
Yep.
All right, you're that guy.
I'm that guy.
All right. But, you know, that conversation has started, and that's good. But there are other partners that will, you know, recommend you reach out to. You know, hospitals, health systems, things like that for therapy opportunities and other things that you can do to expand programming that these guys will talk about in a little bit, but partnerships is key.
Yeah, we have a matrix that will provide for that helps in those conversations and actually gets into some very specific elements and discussion points as part of that. And I guess the one overlaying comment I would make, and the reason we do that matrix is that in most cases, bad partnership is worse than no partnership at all. So we want to make sure that whatever's being done is representing your best interests, is going to be sustainable long-term.
So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to think about this. Based on our experience, we've identified a handful of keys to success. We're going to ask you all to share what you think are maybe one key to success for you as an individual in a minute. But first, I just want to touch base on these. These are things that we considered as we were developing that concept, as we do with any project. And enduring legacy. So, you know, is this a timeless facility? I think the big pool is an example of that enduring legacy. Almost 100 years old, still in operation. From everyone from the lifeguards and the staff at the pool to the woman at the desk at the hotel have memories and are sad to see that change potentially. So there are a lot of folks, as you know, that are really tied to that. So moving forward, how do you maintain that? Whether it's work with this facility or maintain it with a new facility and build a new legacy that will endure. Community impact. Obviously, this will have an impact or can have an impact depending upon the decisions made. We want it to be a positive impact. We want it to help the community continue to grow. Recreation systems and facilities, as you know, are a huge part of economic development. You know, for you to be able to tout the quality of offerings that this community has for attracting business, who has employees that want good schools and good parks and recreation. So that's a big thing. It's a real thing. And so we want to help you consider that as part of the whole matrix of things to identify and consider. Maximize participation. I think that goes without saying. You know, you've got a body of water now that can hold what we determined 4,000 people.
Yeah, I think the capacity, I mean, when you look at what the health department would allow that to have 4,200 people, which is, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of people in that.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah.
So it's not maximized today, which is fine. But whatever you might do in the future, we want to make sure that it is designed in a way that you are able to maximize it, and that's from a programmatic and a facility design standpoint. Operational efficiency, again, whatever you build, you want to make sure it's sustainable financially as well as physically. And then strategic operations, those two go hand in hand. We want to be very thoughtful and providing a facility that you can operate successfully, and that's why Valor King is such a useful part of this team. So, with that little primer, Jennifer, we'll start with you. What would you say is, you know, would you look at this in the future and say, wow, this is successful?
For the big pool specifically?
For this
changes?
project, what would you see as key to the success of this project?
I don't think it can be one thing. I mean, I think in my mind, there's three things for me that are most important, and that is that we use less water than we're currently using. That 200,000 gallons a day and the impact that it has on an area that's in our situation. I think that's really important. The operational expense, what we're spending every year for a 12-week period needs to match up to what we spend in other departments that are open for 12 months or that, you know, that have other operations that might be similar. I mean, we can't be totally out of whack in one recreation area or it prevents us from doing all the things we'd like to do moving forward. And the last is I would love to see it be completely full every day. I would love for the parking lot to be full, for there to be a different event that, you know, maybe one group is interested in one week and somebody else is interested in next week. I just want to see it be full. I want to see it be something that the community is continually talking about and something that we're proud to offer to those who come here. So I think really for me it's those three things.
Okay.
Obviously, the water issue is something from our standpoint that we're working on, reducing water. That would be a key. But from a park standpoint, we'll also look at what the impact of the grounds maintenance around the outside will be to maintenance crews. I know that's off the beaten path a little bit, but it's kind of the thing that gets thrown in at the end of all projects, whether it's a building project or this or that. Just assume that it'll get picked up. So I think of that on the front end.
Yeah.
How's that going to impact maintenance crews?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
I think, from the recreation standpoint, obviously the operations of the facility, being able to program swim lessons, dive-in movies. Generally, what's really popular at the end of the year is pooch plunges and things like that. I've seen where there's the potential to do fishing derbies at the very end of the year after you've kind of let the chlorine go out of the water.
Right after the pooch plunge, right?
Yeah. So right before you're ready to drain it. But there are several events like that I don't see us necessarily having a lot of participation impact with, that I think could be a lot better, and the daily participation. The water loss and just volume is pretty concerning to me, and how that impacts how you staff it, and sightlines for lifeguards, and the ability to have a proper staff rotation, and how many people you have to hire. So I think some of that, and just the safety and health of the water that's physically in the pool, being able to properly chlorinate and filter and meet the higher standards that are kind of out there now.
Okay.
Well, for this to be successful, I think from the community standpoint, we have to realize we're not building, like you've said, we're not building an aquatic center, we're replacing the big pool. We're doing the next step on there. And if we're talking about a timeline in Garden City, from the founding to now, there's very few things from the city commission standpoint that in 20 years there would be a dot on the timeline. Like most likely, I don't know, maybe getting DFA is something that would be on there. Maybe. But redoing the big pool will be a dot on that timeline 50 years from now. So I agree, like what you all saying, that the making it run for the community is important. But if we're talking about what makes it successful as this project, is that legacy piece. It needs to be true to something when 50 years from now, you look back and they're like, oh man, think about what we had then. People would like to say worldwide known facility. We know that. Locally renowned facility where maybe if you go to Wichita, you would say the big pool and like, oh yeah, Garden City. If you say we got a water park and like, yeah, so does Dodge and Hayes and whatever. The building the legacy into that, well, financially doesn't really matter. For the community, that's what's going to be the success, where you can maybe go to Wichita and you say, did you hear that we just did this? And like, oh yeah, we need to make sure we come out there and do that, because that's what I think people feel like they're getting with the big pool. We know the utilization isn't there, but I think that's that piece that people have in their mind is we were known for something with this, and we still need to be known for something through this for it to be a successful project.
Great.
Yeah, so from the economic development standpoint, I think you hit on it really well. Obviously, we serve all of the residents, not only really of our county, but of the surrounding area. We recognize that we're looked to as a leader, and so we absolutely want to be respectful and mindful of our natural resources. So the water thing, I think you'll hear that from all of us, is huge for a lot of reasons, but also from an economic standpoint, we have to make sure that, as Jennifer said, we're not completely out of line in one area that we know isn't getting the utilization. But I think it's still going to be imperative that every resident feels like their voice was heard. Regardless of whether or not their mind can be changed, I don't think that matters. I think it matters that we listen to them. It is ultimately, this is their community.
Yeah.
It's not ours, it's not the mayor's, it's our community. And so I think that's gonna be a huge issue. But I think we also have to be, as Shannon said, looking to the future and making sure, we have 500,000 people in our trade area. What makes them pick this facility over any other facility that might be available for them? And I think that's important as we go forward, that we make the biggest impact we can with the resources we have.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with them, just having something that really stands out here in the community. My 3 would be just having a very efficient facility. The other one is just having the attraction and the interest and the many groups in the community. And also being affordable to be able to come and enjoy the facility.
Yeah.
From Public Works, I would say the community impact for us is, for me, would be one of the big things. What's the cost, what's the operation of it for the community? Also, on the Public Works, how do we get people in and out safely? Be kind of concerned about the pedestrians.
Yep.
Depending on where we build it, we'll be looking at the traffic issues as we go forward, so.
Great.
I'm the water department guy. Everyone has stolen my thunder, but I think we want, in my opinion, I think you want a wow facility that's affordable and I think part of what makes it a wow facility is that everyone has an opportunity to be involved in it. So affordability would be a big concern while still having something that is a good value. And I think, with that being said, my focus would be on the life cycle cost issues, the inputs for chemical, how we're treating the water, what we're doing to try and reduce some of those inputs that right now make the pool pretty expensive to operate. So
Right.
Conserving water, being able to keep good water quality with minimal chemical additions, maybe using some alternate treatment methods for water to help reduce some of those input costs and keep it affordable for the community.
Okay. Well, thank you. That I know for all of us that's helpful, and I'm also happy to hear that really you're on the same page with the way we approach things. A lot about being smart financially, operationally smart with how this is designed and built. But at the same time, this needs to be something meaningful to the community. And it needs to be, we always work in our business at Confluence, we push our young people to work toward authenticity. We don't want to just take whatever Dodge has or any other community and plop it here. This can be yours. This can be uniquely Garden City. Do we know what that is yet today? No. I don't know if anybody in the room is really aware of what that is. Well, it's going to take some work, and we'll talk a little bit about how we get there. But I love hearing all that. It'll help us. We'll hit on, I think, virtually every one of those as we go through this. Anybody else want to comment before I move on, or wait for later?
Big wait.
Save your powder. Okay. Good. So just wrapping up our design process. So we do still draw by hand periodically. So as we get into schematic design, we'll have some illustrations similar to that to just kind of help communicate, similar to what's on the table. Communicate the ideas to the community. We use a lot of photographs, a lot of imagery, because people can visualize a photograph, connect that to a sketchy sketch on the plan sheet, and fill in the in-between in their mind. So we still will do that. I was going to say reverse osmosis.
Yeah.
Like, that's not right.
Yeah.
Rough order of magnitude costs. You got me on the water. Rough order of magnitude costs. So, we gave you a very, very rough ballpark with that concept. And, so the idea is that as we continue to move forward, if you've been through the process, we'll add more detail and continue to refine and refine and refine. But at the earliest stages, we can start to give you an idea of really what the magnitude of this is going to be.
If I can embellish that, just the reason that's so important, because during this conceptual design phase, there'll be a lot of different options out there that we'll want to explore. Some of those will be a base design. Some of those things we might add. Your existing big pool has been added onto over the years, and that's kind of smart. To add a little feature here and there that keeps that public interest in something to celebrate, in the communities and surrounding areas. But the other thing I think it's really important, the wrong time to be low bid is during the conceptual design phase. because it's really important to have accurate financial figures that we can rely on, that when comes bid day, that we're not $2, $4, $5 million over budget. It's like, oh shucks. And so we want to make sure that, and that's one of the things that I know that all of us, BRS has developed a cost estimating program that most architects that don't have that. Confluence has a great database, but they also go out to the market and test it.
Yeah.
WTI not only has a good database, but we also go out to the market and have lots of different pool contractors and general contractors that we work with and say, okay, in Garden City, what is this gonna cost in 2000, whether it's 2020 or 2015 or whatever, obviously not 2015, but, so we can really get those good accurate costs to reflect what the final design is.
I'm not gonna take Dave's thunder, but he's gonna tell you about a strategy that we can use to help at the very earliest stages with the community and engaging them in the process, have them get an idea of cost impact, cost ramification. Everything all your decisions have a cost assigned to them. And so he'll talk about that, but it is important at the very earliest stage that we're upfront with people, like, you want a lazy river? Here's what that could cost. You want these types of slides, you want these types of amenities? They all have a cost associated with them, so people can be involved in that discussion and do some of that prioritizing, so it's not left to a decision-making body. It is coming from the participants in the process.
And beyond the cost is the benefit.
Right.
What user groups do they appeal to? What is unique? And what's that continuation of the big pool story that continues that legacy? And that's so important. So it's all of those things that we have to look at. It's not just throwing a bunch of pieces into an idea and then hoping that it works. It's really baking that great design that will continue the legacy of the big pool.
So then at the end of this process, there's any number of ways we can deliver illustrations. More and more digital is the way we're going because people can really respond to those. We can do them three-dimensionally, two-dimensionally. These are just some examples to show, depending upon the conversation you're trying to have, the campaign, how you want to promote this. We can help you develop the tools to do that, to really get good community excitement going around the design. So I want to jump into, you all have a copy of this concept on your table, on the back or the front, depending on how you look at it, of that 11 by 17 sheet. We're going to talk a little bit about how we came up with that. So even though it wasn't in the proposal, when we start, and this is unique, I think, to having a landscape architect-led team in the way we approach our project. So before we said, well, what would you do with the aquatic park, we wanted to know more about the context. So how does that fit within Finup Park? The relationship to the zoo, the surrounding park spaces, the neighborhoods, the community across the street, understanding how people come in, to your point about people getting in and out safely, hopefully will increase traffic, but that comes with some things that need to be worked out. Pedestrian traffic, that's much more than just, well, how do you get from the parking lot to here? So we want to understand that. So have we solved that yet? No, but we're just trying to understand the kind of the origins and destinations of circulation. One of the things that we'll talk about is this intersection where the zoo entrance is. What a cool arcade entry to the zoo. Is there an opportunity to do something similar with similar importance for this facility that creates that sort of hub in the middle of the park there that really is a place? So we want to talk about that. And then getting into the design, you can see we didn't really do that here yet, and that's part of what I want to say is this is an evolving process. We're not too proud to pick apart our own ideas, and that's what these guys are going to beat it up here in a minute, and I'm just going to sit in the corner and cry. And again, we are looking beyond the perimeter of the pavement and the fence. So it is about how are you going to, what do we got to do to maintain? This is more than just a pool with a fence. It's filtration facilities and pumping equipment, and do we need more parking? What's the capacity going to be? We may want to expand parking. Do we have enough shared parking throughout the park? Those are questions we want to ask, but we at least wanted to plan for some of those types of things. And then if you do this big of a project, you're going to have to basically replace all of the landscaping within that perimeter. If this is the location and you rebuild, you might as well plan on a complete redo of that space just because it's a large project, and that's fine. But conceptually, you can see there, trying to reutilize the existing bathhouse, make that, let that be bathhouse only potentially, maybe build a new concessions building off to the left that also has ticketing, registration, entrance as well as administrative offices in it, and then create some sort of little patio space off of concessions to do something really cool architecturally that blends with cool murals, by the way, on that building. So creating something similarly iconic at that corner to try to make it a place. And that's where we keep all the sticky stuff that people drop. And then really thinking about when people enter, we want to have those zero entry kind of low water features so that we don't have kids sprinting through into the deep water. So understanding the flow of kids and traffic when daycare groups come and all of that. We're trying to manage a group of kids. So providing those leisure and kid and family opportunities at the north end by the entrance, rentable shade space up in that area, a lot of shade. Even having some green spaces inboard of the fencing. So having some lawn, and Doug, we were talking earlier, maybe even bringing some more of that inboard to the paved area to soften that up, to make it a place for people to hang out with their families. Lazy river and slides, back over in this area, but trying to create even maybe some attractions, some features, activate that water to be more than just lazy river, maybe wave river, things like that. And then competitive, 50-meter competitive pool. This could be a future phase. Maybe this is the back end of the facility for the time being. We don't know. And then, some sort of flow rider, wave surf machine. That could be here. These guys will talk about where there might be a better location. Dave might talk about where we might even rethink the entrance to this. I'll just kind of sit down and start crying.
Okay, no, this is like Terry said at the very beginning, this was kind of an effort to respond to the RFP without very much input. And that's almost foreign to us. It's like Russian or some other language because we're also used to getting the input before we ever start picking up a pencil and start drawing stuff. Because we believe that design starts on a spreadsheet. That you really have to understand what is important, from the financial end of things, how many people we're gonna have, all of those types of things. So this concept really was kind of looking at, okay, what are the different kind of components and how the different age groups, because we really want, from what we understand, how do we maximize appeal? Well, you maximize appeal by engaging the youth of all ages and abilities in the community and outside the community that come. You guys have had the dream. You've had that great, iconic destination, the big pool. I mean, everybody knows about it, and so we can't take that away. We want to make it better. And how does that happen? By community input. And so, again, this is just kind of I'll call it a best guess or non-informed guess, but how do we increase how do we maximize appeal by, we do know what a lot of different user groups like, and how do we appeal to them? One of the things I know from the parks and maybe even the recreation side, but bringing turf inside the fence is like, ugh, I gotta get mowers in there, I gotta do that, or I gotta collect the grass. I know that sometimes it's like, that doesn't seem like a good idea. Jennifer and I visited a facility that we did with BRS many years ago, and we have all these great internal grassy berms inside of things that had shade trees and stuff. And I would say 90% of the people that were at that facility were on those places. And I know it creates a little bit more effort, but again, we want to maximize participation. We want to have a memorable experience every time we come to this facility. I know Terry would, but again, having the fence not be just at the hardscape, having grassy areas inside the fence really makes a lot of difference to the user groups. And especially when you have a community that's as ethnically diverse as Garden City. A lot of the places that we have facilities have a lot of economic and ethnic diversity, and you start to see, especially Hispanic populations and maybe even some African populations. They come as a group, right? And they come as a family, and they have to have a spot that, you know, they're kind of gonna claim this spot for the day as for their family kind of destination. And so we wanna welcome that. We wanna celebrate that. We wanna provide that. So it's a great place for those people to come, even if they bring, mother and grandmother that may not think they're gonna go swimming, but they come here and they have so much fun. Yeah, they're gonna get in the water with the kids and have a great time, so they're gonna come back. So this design really kind of started to bring in that idea of maintaining this, understanding that that may or may not be the main entrance. We need to get everybody's opinion. But we were really impressed with the graphics that were done, that abstract, you know, colorful, exciting graphic that was done to make that engaged for the community and tie in to its relationship to the zoo. I think, you know, you guys all know how that works. But the other thing we looked at is, you know, we try to group these things. And I think if we go to the next slide, just kind of real quickly, you know, we kind of tried to group this into the adventure and excitement. You know, one of the things that, you know, we've seen that become very popular. What's the hardest group to reach out to in a community?
Like that 13 to 18
The teens, yeah, the teens that have a driver's license.
or a phone.
Or, yeah, or a phone. And so, how do we get them engaged? Because they can come and they can really this can be a quality of life experience for them. One of the things that we've seen, you know, lazy rivers are great people holders. It's a great thing for that age group, you know, because they get in these big chains of inner tubes floating around the river, and they're talking and, you know, being smart in front of each other and all these kind of things. It's really fun for them. They keep coming back, you know. Then the other thing is we've seen this surf zone become something that's been very fun for a lot of, because it's a skill level too. They're not only having fun, exercising and having clean fun with their friends, they're doing something healthy. You know, they're using their core muscles, they're learning to be well balanced, and it's a good revenue driver too, because if you put it next to food service and things like that, again, you only have 1 or 2 people on this machine, but you have 150 of their friends watching them wiping out or not wiping out, and seeing how good they can become and standing in line to enjoy it. So it's one of those things, it might not fit here, but it's one of those things that's just an idea. We looked at the importance of competition swimming. As I said, that's how I got into this industry originally. Competition swimming is a very important aspect, but it's also, if you know, in the summer season, outdoors, it's a long course season. So you want to make sure you have if you're going to do a pool that's going to have competitions, short course doesn't really make a lot of sense, because you're going to do mostly long course meets in the summertime. So it's a consideration. Jeff will say, well, maybe not having that much water is important. Well, if we're going to have that much water because we need that capacity, we want to make sure we can engage this not only for the swimming practices, but also how do we make it fun and exciting for all the teens, and how we do establish friendly competition. We'll show you some of the watertainment ideas that we're gonna show you a little bit later. But again, it kind of shows the different types of zones. And I know if we go back, Jennifer, if you don't mind going back, and you know, so maybe this is the entry, but there might be another thing, and there might be another spine here that Terry kind of introduced about, you know, that spine from the zoo to engage some activities here, so that if we had like an entrance here, you know, again, we need restrooms, and if we're ever thinking about having an enclosed pool, maybe this changes a little bit. You know, again, we don't know if these are the right components or not, but let's say we do want to put a 50-meter pool down here. Maybe if we have an entrance building here, we slide this to the south, we reposition this surfing up into a different area, or maybe we bring it more front and center. Maybe it's the big surf pool, you know, or something like that. You know, I'm just throwing out ideas. But again, that way, now you could have an entrance that could be used year-round, you know, have restroom facilities in it, and have a seasonal open pool, and then have a seasonally closed pool that could operate year-round. It's an idea.
And I think one of the synergies that created from the team before you is, and Terry said, we start picking this stuff apart, but we raise other aspects that come into that design concept. For example, with this layout, if you have a 50-meter pool, we're sitting there saying, all right, where would you stage the swimmers? And what impact would that have on the rest of the facility? Would you have to close the rest of the facility because you had an event going on? So we want to make sure we're incorporating that. The wave pool, the surf pool that Doug's talking about, in many cases that can be a revenue source, but from an operations perspective, when I hear that, I'm saying, all right, how do we control it then? Have a separate control point for that. What are we doing for staging and watching? So it's not just looking at it from kind of a construction perspective and a design concept. It's also rolling in kind of how sustainable that is from an operation perspective as well. Understanding, if you're talking green space, you're talking high maintenance green space at that. It's not the kind of green space you can come in and hit with a gang mower. You know, it's the one-on-one stuff and you know, making sure that we're talking about those aspects as the concepts being developed.
This is the part about Jeff we don't like.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's important, we like to give you kind of examples. One example is Moses Lake, Washington. Anybody ever been there? It's out in the middle of Washington. It's kind of a city similar to Garden City. The fact that it's the same size. They had the biggest pool in the state of Washington for the longest time. It was a 50-meter pool with the zero depth entry. People from Seattle, Spokane, everywhere, Pasco, drove up to that pool because it was the biggest pool. They knew they could find some water with their families. Well, people started building pools around them, right? To, you know, keep people in their communities. What they did is they added a lazy river and a surf machine that, exactly like Jeff was talking about, had a controlled entrance, had some extra bathroom facilities that operate, because everybody wants to go surfing. Surfing in a wetsuit's not that big of a deal, so they open that thing up in April and they keep it going until October. And it gives that youth, the teenage youth, something to do. They come and enjoy that all the time. So it's those are the types of discussions and stories and examples that we can bring to and help increase that story of the big pool.
But one other thing, one of your questions was, what if we were to enclose a competition pool? And we have some other slides to talk to those, but if it was going to be located on this site, if you do an indoor pool, you're going to have an attached locker facility of some sort, which changes sort of the concept of trying to reuse the existing bathhouse. Totally flips everything in terms of how you might plan out all the different spaces. So depending on the decisions that are made during this process, plans will certainly be influenced as to how it's organized to make the most sense.
And one of the kind of innate things that this plan shows that it's hard to, see this, and, when you think about the best beaches of the world, how are they oriented? They're always oriented they face to the south or the southwest. So not only, because most people want to sit at the beach, look out over the beautiful ocean or waterway, and they want to be able to see their family in front of them, and so that's what we try to make sure we're experiencing here, is like all of these places that we're putting shallow water experiences, all of those have a west to a southwest orientation. I mean, I've been to facilities, you walk in and it's like not too many people are there, you don't really understand why, because they have all the components, but it's the solar orientation that just is wrong. It's really important to make sure we control the safety of entry with having the zero depth entry close to the entrance so kids don't have that breakaway moment. But again, it's how all those things are oriented throughout the architectural and the landscape design really make a big difference of how it's used later on. Just like the big pool. The big pool, you come in there, which way you facing? Absolutely. And if you change that, if you came in the south side to the north, you would have a lot less safety and a lot less usership. So those are the important things. So I think we can go to the next slide. Again, we showed you just some groupings of how we have these different types of facilities to engage users, to maximize safety, but also maximize participation. I think the next slide kind of starts to look at, again, we want to provide innovative solutions that maximize participation. The only reason to innovate is to maximize participation. But innovation also has, somebody was talking about using different technologies to help maybe, make it safer, make it lower cost and things like that. Jennifer talked about Europe. Europe is ahead of the United States in terms of some of that innovative ideas in terms of how to sanitize pools at lower cost and better safety aspects. So we learn from the projects that we do in Europe. Operations, we want to make sure that we have transparent design so we do provide that very good level of safety without ever compromising the operations or safety, but with the fewest staff possible. So all the designs. So watertainment, what is watertainment? Has anybody ever heard that word before? Watertainment is really everything that creates maximum use in a pool. So we'll kind of go through these pretty quickly, but it starts with participation in programs, from water exercise programs. And again, here's a pool, a flat water pool, not too many people swimming laps, but look at this group here. This is a group that may not even come to the pool. They don't even own a swimming suit, but they can come to the pool and do water exercise. And again, they're standing on these, has anybody done that before, those big float boards? It's a lot of good exercise because you've got to maintain your balance and then you're trying to do all your exercise. And so it's great for developing balance and core values or core strength. And again, it's really a fun group. But again, it maximizes the use of a pool that isn't in use sometimes.
Oops, sorry.
Again, learning to swim and using water for aqua therapy and wellness, that's really important. Different types of water fitness groups really love the pool because, again, pools are very good for, especially for older people that may have become deconditioned. And now they can use water because it's resistance both ways. But what's the biggest fear of that group? Why don't people get into aquatherapy classes? Fear of swimming suits, of course. A lot of people that are deconditioned, they maybe not even have a swimming suit and they're a little self-conscious, And so again, you can see this group, they come to that. And I'll tell you, once you develop a program like that, it's like a religious experience because those guys keep coming back and back and back and they tell their friends and it becomes a very social experience. So we look at other types of watertainment. It's really important to look at big shade structures, big play structures, all the different things and how they're oriented. And you can see in some areas of the country, it's really important to bring that shade into the water so that people can enjoy the water in the shade and have a lot of fun. When you start looking at these big play structures, they're a lot of fun, but they have maintenance cost and they have staffing cost because what's somebody doing on the other side of that? If you have one lifeguard, even if they're a rover, you can't see. So those are the types of things that we have to talk about so we get the right design. Bring in unique things. When I first heard of this in Europe and they asked me to come test this, I thought this is the craziest idea ever and it'd never work. Can you imagine? Remember growing up and having the floors all nice and shiny in your family home, taking your socks off and running across that floor and sliding across that floor? That's what this is. It's a great idea. I thought it was the craziest thing I ever saw, but then I spent 2 hours doing it. And it was so much fun because it's just like skiing. You can control how fast you're going, but how you're leaning over your feet. But it's a stand-up slide. You're sliding down this slide, and your arms are out here so you can catch catch yourself if you fall. But it's really safe because you don't fall because you're kind of in a really controlled environment. And again, it's not for everybody. It's just bringing out ideas to increase the watertainment aspect. The next slide kind of shows going down a water slide. Today's youth grew up with this, right? It's their friendly competition. So these water slides are expensive. How do we maximize usage out of it? Well, if you put a timing system on it, guess what? If I go down it, and I get 25 seconds, what's my daughter gonna wanna do?
She's gonna beat
yeah,
you.
Yeah, she's gonna beat, so it turns into a fun, friendly competition, and you can imagine teenagers. They try to get the fastest time ever, and they're bragging rights and stuff like that. And so it's really, it's a really fun way to activate the slide. A water slide like this could easily be $300,000 to $400,000. If a person only uses it once or twice a day, is that a good investment? No. If you do this, they're gonna stand in line and use it all the time because it's friendly competition.
There's even one client we have that has gone and put music systems in their water slide. So you can choose the music you're gonna listen to as you go down. Or in some case, you could
Put video
light
boards.
system,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, there's things you can do to enhance that experience.
We just did one in Aurora, Colorado, where there's actually timing system and a video board. So you can pick what scene, what music, and as you're going down, it's a jungle theme, could be an underwater theme. So in the underwater theme, it's kind of cool because you go through and you see some jellyfish that you slide around, and then you go through and you see some seahorses or things, but then all of a sudden you're sliding, all of a sudden this big shark's coming towards you, opens his mouth, and whoosh, you slide underneath it. And so again, those are the types of things, it's not for everybody, but those are the types of ideas that engage people and maximize participation. Here's something that I saw in Europe and in Asia that was just so exciting because, I never understood it because I saw these in all the pools, but I didn't really get it, like, why is that exciting? Until I got to use it. I was in a pool and boy, it gives a great back massage. So Jennifer and I were at a pool the other day and they had these in there and the kids were playing with it. But the neat thing is when you do a water exercise program, this active aging adult group really love it because they can back up against that, get a nice massage. And whether it's a gentle massage or a more vigorous deep tissue massage, it's a fun thing, but the kids are spraying each other and having fun with it. So again, looking at how we do dive-in movies and fun things to activate the pool at night, especially big bodies of water. The next next one, these are different ideas, Zorbs. Has anybody ever done this? It's kind of claustrophobic and it's kind of hot inside of there, but you don't do this all the time, but it's one of those things that could be used. The next one kind of shows one of the fun things to do is doing aqua gyms in the water. Increase participation by doing fitness in the water. You have the kind of the resistance of the water. You can see it kind of goes to that group exercise stuff that I know that David and his group always do with a lot of different recreation centers. So the next one is, again, thinking about how to do fun things for that increased participation, but also look what's happening here. Has anybody ever slacklined? It's really popular. You put it between like two posts or trees, and it's kind of like tightrope walking, but it's a web. So it's kind of hard to do, but it's, people with good balance can do that. Again, they're exercising. That kid doesn't look like he has a whole lot of heaviness to them. But again, the important thing is here, he's having fun, but look at this group. What are they doing? They're visualizing themselves on that. Maybe next, I'll get out there. And so it's how to increase participation. So this is kind of a pool that we've done that has competition swimming, but again, it kind of shows the slack line in the pool, some diving boards and some drop slides to, activate that pool when it's not being used for competition swimming or lap swimming. Log rolling. This is something that, again, you can take in and take out of the pool to help maximize participation. It's a lot of fun. Again, these are the types of things that help build skills. It's friendly competition, and it is a lot of fun. And we're starting to see those in a lot of different types of pools and having competitions. That people come to your pool to actually do a competition on those log rolling things. This is an idea on a big, large pool. Anybody ever seen Ninja Warriors on television? We were in Europe and saw this on a lap pool where it actually retracted up into the ceiling. And we took a look at that and said, how could we bring that to the United States market? So one of the people on that tour, actually has started developing this because he knows the guy that actually develops all those Ninja Warrior courses. So this is something you could put over a large lap pool, indoors or outdoors, and it comes down, and whenever I went to a facility in Europe that had this, they do it at certain times, but when I was there, they were nice enough to bring it down for it. And boy, it was so fun to see. People would be out of the lap pool, bring that thing down, everybody would come from all over the place to kind of jump through that, because you start at one end, you go through the water, and different water depths, you have climbing things, you have different obstacles, you get to the end, you get a time. And so it becomes that friendly competition. So it's a way to engage a big pool with other things, but it's not like a floatable, so it's really easy to see from a lifeguarding and safety perspective.
And I think it's only 55 seconds to go up and down. So for as big as it looks, from an operational perspective, they estimate 2 guards, and it's up and down in a minute.
Does that seem like something that'd be kind of fun to do every once in a while? And so I guess this question is, have you previously designed similar facility that has ever been built? Yeah, we've had a few experiences with doing this. But again, let's talk about some iconic ones that were very important to think about.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, so landscape architect-led team, this is a large park project that's finishing up right now. And it's one that we led. It had architectural components, engineering, environmental, a whole slew of folks involved. But I think what's interesting is, even though it's not man-made water, it's still got the same sort of watertainment features. They floated out an obstacle course that just opened up last weekend or the weekend before. They're doing the same thing. They're trying to maximize use of the beach with kayaking. And then they've also got some of the more iconic things. The kids can splash in the runnels, things like that. Marina. All of this is, it's a natural way to engage people in water. So even though when we talk theming later, it doesn't always have to be bright, colorful, off-the-shelf stuff. There's some unique custom ways to do that as well. Splash park that was just opened up in Blue Springs. This one was a design build, so in terms of procurement or delivery method. And it was, what I think is interesting about this is it's fit into an existing park, much like you're talking here, or with your other potential splash parks beyond the big pool, is how could we design and fit some of those into other neighborhood parks around the community. So coming into parks, how do we fit that within the existing park system without upsetting what's already in place? And then this is one that we all worked together on in Olathe, the rec center, the outdoor, this was an existing 40-acre park where there was a new community center built. BRS, Architecture, and WTI did the indoor aquatics, and then we were the master planning landscape architect on the team. But again, it's things, not only have we built them, we've built them together. This is a project, the Bay in Kansas City, Missouri, that we were the prime on again, had an aquatics consultant, architectural consultant, similar components to what's being talked about here, lazy river, slides, the family pools, things like that. And that was a $5 million budget. There was a question about, can you build something for $6 million? Well, that was built in 2009 or 10. So inflate that up. It's going to be more than 6, might be more like 8 or 9, roughly. But yes, you can do it, in that range, and these folks will talk to you about that. And then finally, Excelsior Springs, another joint project, BRS and WTI, with indoor aquatics, but even more importantly, are you guys working on the second phase right now? So they're building it or designing it right now?
Well, it was a study that they're waiting to get funding.
They're getting funding for it. So this community center, I forget the population, but Excelsior Springs, small town outside of Kansas City, had huge turnout to their new community center, so much that they're ready to move forward with phase 2, which is outdoor aquatics, which will be just adjacent to and outside their indoor aquatics. So it's been a major success for them. And so again, it's that we may plan for all the facilities, but we may build them in over phases.
And collectively, Hank from your office is working on us with that to,
Yeah.
do the landscaping on it.
I'm going to give this to you guys because I think most of the rest of these are up to you.
Yeah, so you guys asked this question about what if we were to enclose a competition pool? Number of things. Is this something you can design for us? Yes, we can certainly do that. Have we designed something similar? Yes, we're gonna show you a few examples. And what would this cost? So, you know, putting out a number as to what it would cost is, at this point, we can't say. We don't know is it a 50-meter pool? Is it a 25-yard pool? You know, depending on what it is. So one of the ways we get after and help communities decide on what should be in their program is we use this card game. And we sit down with the group and we generally try to go for a budget. And what happens usually is everyone wants more than they can afford. So they have to look at all these cards, because we've got different size pools, different number of lanes, you know, all kinds of options. When we do it for a community recreation center, we've got another 100 cards that show different size gymnasiums and weight rooms and community meeting spaces. But then they juggle the prices, and everyone in the group has to negotiate with each other. Well, we really need a 25-yard by 25-yard pool. And someone else says, well, I think we can do it with just an 8-lane 25-yard pool. It's just fine, and look how much that saves. So you go through this negotiation process by looking at these cards. It has basically the features, the capital cost, and then down in the right-hand corner is a little bit of an assessment about whether it's going to require a subsidy or whether it's self-supporting. It tells the relative amount of revenue that it might produce versus some other use. So, you know, depending on what you choose and where you go with it, this is one of the tools we would use to work with you to make a decision. These red cards are ones that you're gonna have locker space if you're gonna have a pool. You're gonna need a lobby, you're gonna need some support space for staff.
This is all ancillary items.
Those are things that, yeah, usually when we do it, we just say, okay, the red cards you have to have.
Yeah.
The blue ones, you start figuring out which things you really need. And then on the back side of the cards is a little image that illustrates what that might look like, a similar facility that represents what's on the front of the card.
Dave, before you move off that slide, I know one of the questions, part of the question was, you know, the pros and cons of indoor versus outdoors. You know, obviously, when you go indoor, you're increasing the cost of operation significantly because now you have an envelope around the pool that you have to maintain that you don't have in an outdoor environment. But on the flip side, now you've got a facility you can use 52 weeks out of the year instead of the 12 weeks that you're currently using. So we certainly recognize there's some of those pros and cons, and again, that's what we see as part of our role is to help define that in terms of operations, so that you can bring that calculation into your decision-making model.
So we've done this with lots of groups, where each of these tables has a stack of cards that they go through and they're assigned to say, okay, we've got a $15 million budget. Get us to that budget based on selecting certain cards. And we've done it with just smaller groups as well. Again, it just depends on how you want to operate it and take that on.
Dave, I remember real quick, when we did that for the Olathe Community Center, I was involved with that, and we had 3 or 4 groups in separate rooms, and they went through their own negotiation and built their perfect community center. And then we got them all together and said, okay, now you guys are gonna have to fight over whose is really the perfect, because they were all very different. And so then there was even further negotiation going on, and it yielded pretty much what they have today.
Consensus. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we're trying to get to, is how do you get to consensus?
Yeah.
When you've got a diverse group of people that have different opinions and different agendas, certainly.
Mhm.
So it's really an educational process to reach out to the community to say, okay, you know, there's a world of options. What's it gonna cost? What are the ramifications of going with this, and what are you gonna not have in other facilities? But again, it helps build that consensus in the community, so they have their voices heard.
Well, one other thing that it does, sitting here, that comes to mind is, I mentioned, you know, having other people out in the community that are on board and supportive. So it gets these other people involved, it gets your community members involved. And so when somebody says, well, why didn't we do this? There are people out there that can say, well, you know, that actually costs this much, and we decided this was more important. And it doesn't have to be you, the commission members or elected leaders. It's the city, it's the residents kind of policing themselves. And it just makes things much better when they hear it from their peers.
So here's a few examples of some covered facilities, and it goes from this extreme, which is a fabric covered rigid frame structure that is changeable. So in the summer season, you take down the fabric panels and it becomes an outdoor pool. In the wintertime, you put all the fabric back into the frames and it becomes an enclosed facility like this. You get
And that facility's 25 years old right now, and they've replaced the fabric once.
Can I ask a
You've gotta-
question on that?
Yeah.
How does that handle snow and things like that in the winter?
Well, this is in Bend,
So
Oregon. They
it's
get
a lot of snow.
bunch of snow and cold weather.
It's just a matter of designing to the
Yeah.
right structure.
Yeah.
What
Yeah, so,
does-
so we designed, or this has been designed so that there's a snow place, you know, this doesn't really illustrate it well, but as the snow comes off of it, you know, there's a way to get a bobcat in there and get rid of the snow. Or if it, you know, that was because it's in a very hilly terrain. You could do it, you know, where you could easily access it if you didn't have the hills.
What about activity during lightning underneath that? Would that still be possible, or?
The answer is, there's no safe space when lightning is occurring. And so, some communities kind of take the approach, well, I could be outside in my, you know, outside, and I could get hit by lightning or in a car. Most facilities, when there's that threat of, not just a threat that's 50 miles away of lightning, but when it's getting more closer, you know, there's detect devices and stuff like that. Most people close down their indoor
Even indoor,
pools.
yeah.
Yeah, even their indoor pools, you know, because, you know, if the lightning were to strike the building and somehow got to the water, it's, you're toast.
So how does how does this facility compare in cost, to the cards that you gave us for an indoor facility?
Those costs are for conventional construction,
Okay.
which would be more like
Right,
this kind of
Right.
construction. So,
It's
to go to a fabric is probably, I don't know, 30 or 40% less, probably.
okay.
Now, meeting, you know, today's energy codes, you're enclosing a pool, you know, we're gonna have to insulate the fabric structure very heavily. So we've gotta meet all the new codes, but it can be done. And taking up and down a fabric structure takes a lot of
Yeah.
time and effort. It's
Yeah.
not something you take lightly, particularly if it's a 50-meter pool, and if you tried to do 25 yards by 50 meters, that's a huge span. That's a lot of fabric to try and
And then where you
manage.
gonna store it?
You gotta store it, put it on pallets, and it's an economic decision. You're gonna pay a little bit more for operations but it lowered the capital cost.
You can see this is like an 8-lane pool, so it's not nearly as wide as a 25-yard wide pool by 50 meters. So, you know, this is a little more manageable. Once you get into some of these much bigger spans, the difficulty of managing that fabric and making that turnaround each season becomes more and more onerous on the operator.
And I will say, just kind of as, you know, how do our clients respect us as a team? You know, we worked on this one maybe 20 some odd years ago. We've done 2 other facilities, and Ballard King and BRS are part of those designs. So they respect that, you know, the ability to bring good knowledge to them so that they can build stuff.
So this is a center we did a few years ago for the Adams 12 school district. It's 5 high schools share this facility and use it as their competition venue, their practice facility. It's also used by master swimmers programs. Lots of private organized swim groups use it. They do underwater hockey. They've got an underwater hockey thing set up in the bottom of the pool. If you have ever seen that, it's a pretty unusual deal where they've got little hand
Like a bunch of ducks in the
hockey
water.
things, and
Yeah.
there's a puck on the bottom, and they have to come up for air, go down, and then they go after the puck into the goal at each end.
It's a contact sport.
Two teams.
You know, one comment I want to make about the 50-meter pool, and I think it's been made before, that typically the 50-meter configuration is a summer time, there's a long course season. The benefit of that 50-meter pool isn't in 50-meter configuration. The real benefit of that is the multitude of activities that you can have in that same body of water. As you look at the way this is configured now, they basically have 16 lap lanes, so just imagine how many different teams could be in there practicing at the same time. They're not swimming 50-meter length, but that gives you the ultimate flexibility from a programming perspective.
And when you're doing a competition pool and you're a spectator, the last thing you want is to be looking across the pool and have a whole bunch of windows on the opposite side
Yeah.
with this reflective glare coming off the water. You can't really watch it. So we've designed a lot of these indoor competition pools with very few windows, lots of overhead natural daylighting to really light up the bottom of the pool, which is really important for safety and being able to see what's going on as a lifeguard. But then we use the movable bulkhead so you can have different length courses.
And this particular pool, it's in the Metro Denver area, but I believe that has some sort of an event. But
Yeah, 50 weeks.
50 weeks a
Like
year.
They've got an event.
And so from an economic impact, that's heads and beds and people eating in the restaurants and buying gas, so it's
It
really
takes a lot
important.
of effort to do that. It doesn't happen overnight.
So, I mean, we'll go through some of these just really quickly. This is a Louisville pool, or this is the Westside Aquatic Center in Louisville. I can't remember how many high schools
It's
participate in this.
Joint school districts, so there's a sharing, and they actually recover their entire operating budget every year. And it's because it's programmed from sun up to the middle of the night. And they have people coming through it and fighting for that time. They've got synchronized swimmers that use it like crazy, water polo folks that use it like crazy. And then the schools have different swim programs that come in throughout the day.
And it's a 70-meter pool with because of the diving well that you can't see here. And again, this is the Frisco Aquatic Center. Very well, this kind of illustrates a high school meet. To Jeff's point, it's a 50-meter pool, a lot of cross lanes. They can do diving, swimming, and warm up, warm down in this pool, or have heats. And this is, I think, 5 different school districts in Frisco that use this. And it is so popular and so heavily used that they're building another one next to this so they can do practice, because they don't have enough practice time. This particular one is a recent one that we just got finished doing in Hobbs, New Mexico. David, do you want to kind of talk about this one?
Yeah, this is a very large center in Hobbs, New Mexico, of all places. You wouldn't think they could pull off something like this, but they've got a lot of oil money down there and a lot of foundations that contributed to the cost of building this facility. But this is
partnerships.
25-yard by 25-meter pool. On this side, on the other side of the glass is a whole indoor recreational aquatics facility. By separating them acoustically, you can actually do some coaching in here, because the other pool is so darn noisy, you can't even hear yourself think if you opened up that wall between them.
On the partnerships though, they had agreement, they planned this thing, it started in 2009 and it opened last year. And they had the county, the city, they had the university, they had the community college, they had like 7 distinct different groups that had to come together to really pull this thing off. And now that they have, it's become an economic driver in the area. And they're actually hosting their first New Mexico Park and Rec conference there this fall because people want to come and see it and people want to come.
So these next 2 examples are everybody's heard about the time trials that happened in Omaha for the Olympic swimming. These are legacy pools from that. This particular one in Fargo, North Dakota is, after there's two 50-meter pools that are put up on the concrete, kind of a podium type pool for the Olympic time trials. And those pools are then sold and reused. This is one that was for the 2012 Olympics, and it was up to Fargo, North Dakota. Very well-respected swimming program. Again, this kind of shows spectator seating on both sides. It's a huge success for that community. The next one is in Richmond, Virginia. This particular pool, they call this an enterprise pool. This pool is so busy all the time. And this was from the 2008 Olympics time trials. And again, it's the neat thing about the legacy of that is people can talk about what Michael Phelps said, 20 records in this pool and all that type of stuff. So it helps the story of these facilities. And so one of the things we talk about fiscal sustainability and cost recovery and things like that is if we have big bodies of water, that we need to have people to maximize that participation to come into it. So these are the floatables as opposed to the drop down things. And again, these are fun, but they're a lifeguarding nightmare. And so those types of things are, I think are going to be replaced by that kind of idea that drops down. But again, using climbing walls, dive-in movies, different types of programming, exercise groups, and fun things to maximize that participation.
So just a couple of examples, we're talking about the pools and inside, what does some of the architecture look like and the character? This is, Terry was showing the Olathe Center a little bit ago. This is the outside of the Olathe Center. This is a small family aquatic center that we did in Brighton, Colorado, just to see the sort of the design of their bathhouse. And this is that 5-star or Adams 5-star school district Veterans Memorial Aquatic Center. That's got the big 50-meter pool, and you can see, even though it doesn't have many windows, you can do some fun things with the lobby and so forth.
So
give this back to you.
Okay, thank you, David. So again, what if the city of Garden City wanted to remove the existing facility, go back to a similar type facility? And so what examples have you had with that? And so a couple different ideas, how we replace the facility. This was in Lethbridge, Alberta. And again, they have at least 60 nice days during the summer. Yeah, 30. Yeah, maybe it's just on a good year it's 60. It's usually it's 30. But again, it's important because the people want to get outside and enjoy the pool. So this pool, I think, was back from the 1950s. They had fences all around it. It's kind of a genre that it wasn't very appealing, except for the grassy areas around the pool. And so what they wanted to do is replace this pool. The bathhouse was okay. So basically what we did is we put in it's nearly 14,000 square foot pool that has 0 depth entries, water slides, a splash pad, all the different things that appeal to the user groups. So what they did when they did this, they quadrupled the attendance of that pool because it was so, much more appealing to the user groups, and that kept the same size. But again, it was a manageable size at nearly 14,000 square feet. This is another pool, the University of New Hampshire in Durham, New Hampshire. This was a 46,000 square foot outdoor pool. You can kind of see it used to be kind of a flow through pool. There was a dam at this end of it. It was one of those things. This was a fun project because the community was very attached to this pool. They did not want to see anything change on it, except for they had the same concerns. It was losing so much water. It was costing so much to operate, even though they didn't pay for it, the university paid for it. And you couldn't see, this is a difficult picture to see this, but you can see in the summertime, it looked like a lake. they have granite that's stuck into the concrete, so it's really dark, and there's algae, and it was really difficult to see the bottom, so I think what really kind of spurred it, they did have some near drownings in it. They finally said, well, we got to do something with this pool. And so, again, it was a very passionate group that we worked with. And at the end of the day, they got everything they wanted. They got a huge zero depth entry. They can still do all their kayaking practice and fun things here. They got a zero depth entry. They got a lap pool. And so it took it down to about a 15,000 square foot pool, but it was much more manageable in terms of cost and a much better user experience because they had adequate deck space around the pool for people to enjoy, and they actually had some grass area that they brought into it as well. This is a Cherry Creek in Weatherford, Texas. This is kind of showing their existing pool. It was a huge, big pool that, has anybody been there in Weatherford?
We're all laughing because that's where our planner is moving to our city planner.
Well, they've got a lot of things going on. And this was really kind of a launching pad. This was an existing pool that its day was over. You know, it was still kind of popular in the community, but it just didn't have the appeal. So they renovated this pool. They still kept some lap lanes for a 25-yard course, but then they added this zero depth entry and the splash pad, and it's been just hugely successful. I know Jennifer went to the grand opening here recently.
Yeah, they just had their grand opening and it was packed full of people. And they really fought the same thing of respecting the past while looking towards a safer, more operable future. And so they had these incredible banners up all throughout the park that had the history of the pool and exactly what you're talking about with the timeline. And they had what did we do at what year and what was impactful. And so then there's this big space for what's happening next. And they did a really great job. They had a very involved commission and the place was packed. It had a ton of shade, and that's actually kind of just to the left behind the shade, that's turf. So to reduce the mowing challenge, that's turf. So people can spread out and relax. And then over there, kind of behind the basketball court, they actually had lounge furniture like we would put in our backyard. Really comfortable lounge furniture. So you felt like you were going to a place you were going to sit at and stay for the day.
But again, just the idea of safety, you enter in here, you come to the splash pad, the zero depth entry, and the deeper waters on the far side. Again, it just shows that every community is a little different, but they have the same kind of things. They want to maintain that great entertainment value. So if the City of Garden City wanted to add one more splash parks, what would we do? And so,
Go ahead and click
let's just look through this.
one. So, you know, we looked at the locations that were identified as potential splash park locations, and so similar to the big pool site, we want to look at the context. And just think about, okay, what are the parts and components that you would need to go with a splash pad? Parking, shade, you know, mechanical restrooms, things like that. Have not solved anything by any means, but just trying to think about circulation, exposure, what's the best way to get in and out. Ultimately, this all has to be tested against, you know, what is the right size? What size facility do you want? How many people are we talking about? And, you know, what does that mean in terms of parking and circulation?
And so again, we don't have any solution yet, but we have a lot of experience in doing the splash pads. This is actually a splash pad that's associated with a very, very popular indoor aquatics facility that more is engaging during the summer months. And so again, using some of the iconic symbols of the community. There's a big water tower in town, and just some of the fun things that are happening in this facility. Again, a lot of different types of designs that are important. So it's really it's critical to get the input from the community to design these things to be the right size and the right efficiency for that community. As kind of, and most of these are free to use type components, but that doesn't mean they're any less maintenance, because then you have a lot of solenoid valves that are firing, you got a lot of things going on here that are moving, so it's important to make sure everybody understands, just because we don't lifeguard this, doesn't mean there's no maintenance to it. So if the City of Garden City wanted to construct a facility and only spend $6 million, what would that look like? And can you give us some examples? And so this is a project that we did, and David introduced that earlier about Brighton in Colorado. They wanted everything, but how many acre site that they have, David, it was pretty constrained.
Yeah, it was very constrained.
And it was like long and narrow. But anyway, they wanted a wave pool, they wanted a lazy river, they wanted a zero depth entry kids pool, they wanted a huge water slide complex. Well, we were able to accomplish all of that stuff within the $6 million.
Yeah, 6 plus, but that was also 8 or 9 years ago.
5.4.
Yeah, but, and that include parking and things like that. But again, we gotta realize that was a few years ago, so escalation. But again, you can kind of see from this, we have some internal grass, and you can see the number of users, lots of chase lounge chairs. You know, this is the entrance into the facility, so here's the concessions area, and here's the changing rooms, and here's that zero depth entry, big broad zero depth entry, a big play structure, and kind of a fun play area. And this was a unique river at the time. On this side of it, it's just a nice, gentle, lazy river. On this side of it, we created this big wave machine that now we send people down the chute with big waves, and we capture all those waves in the plunge pool where the slides come into. So it was a way to kind of get everything that they wanted in a relatively confined space in a very tight budget. Again, this is the first colony is kind of showing another renovation of a facility that increased, they have a splash pad, a nice plunge pool to the river. One of the things that's important when you do a lazy river is having clear inner tubes, because when you have like opaque inner tubes, you can't see through it. And if these weren't clear, who's underneath the water underneath all these people? And so it's really important from a safety perspective. Again, Abilene, Venture Cove in Abilene. This kind of illustrates a lot of different things. They had a pretty tired looking pool that just, people weren't using it that much except on those hot days in Abilene. And we remodeled their bathhouse. But basically what we added in this first phase was a zero depth entry pool, had the correct solar orientation, had some nice shade structures, and put a nice long lazy river. So this really kind of shows that transparent design. There's not a lot of things that get in the way of your sight lines there, so it's easy to lifeguard. A long linear river, so you can guard the corners and not have to guard every single square foot of it and have a good visual connection. This was designed with a inner tube slide that came into the lazy river, and then a slide that came into a run out, so it helped reduce lifeguarding staff. This facility has been so popular, they just added the second master plan water slide to come into this facility.
And they're growing as they can afford to. So this was under 5 million all-in site and everything, and it opened 2 years ago. So it's relatively recent and being under that $6 million mark. And there's plans that have already been drawn up for how to expand the lazy river. On the backside here, they've got a senior center, and they've got a bunch more room that they can continue to utilize. So they have planned out other ways to bring out that lazy river, since that tends to be the most packed. And then in the way back there, that's a shade pavilion, and they make massive amounts of revenue from birthday parties at that shade pavilion. So I think that's an underutilized area of these things that we don't talk about all the time, but great opportunity to make your money back.
And the funny thing was, when we first got there, when we started looking at this site, they had this huge parking lot you can see out there. They said, well, we really don't need that big of a parking lot because nobody uses the pool except, every once in a while. We could probably have a quarter of the size. Now they're happy they have that size parking lot because people are using the facility. Oops, did I miss one here?
No, I think you're good.
Okay, I'm sorry. So this is another one, Sailfish Splash. Again, this is not a $5 million facility. This, what are some facilities that we've done recently that are in the $15 million range. So this has a huge zero depth entry, a nice long lazy river, a splash area, all sorts of fun stuff on this side. And on the other side of this is their pavilions. They actually have a 50-meter pool and a warm-up, warm-down pool that's very heavily used. And it's been a huge success. As a matter of fact, they're expanding this facility because it's been so successful. And again, here's another one in Cherokee County. They wanted indoors and outdoors. It's an indoor 50-meter pool that's heavily used and very well programmed. On this side of the wall is actually a warm water therapy pool, wellness pool, that's used for learn to swim programs and all sorts of things. And then this is their seasonal outdoor pool with a big play structure and water slides and lazy river. And again, this facility is very well used. And again, one of the questions you guys asked, how much water volume is the design that we kind of walked through earlier? How many gallons does that have? Remember that your existing facility is 2.2 million gallons of water. What we were showing has 1,367,000 gallons. And again, that was just kind of a placeholder. Your existing facility is 70 some odd thousand square feet. Does anybody know that?
70, 77.
Yeah, 72 something.
Yeah, 72,000 square feet. What we're showing for program space is 31,190. But again, the capacities are very similar. But the appeal, once you develop the story, so it's a legacy story, would be very similar because, I don't think right now you're seeing the 4,000 people capacity per day there. And so when you look at the capacity of this facility, it's 1,700. So, again, it's one of those things that more right-sized for the community and the demographics. But again, throughout the course of this study, we'll actually reach out to the community, understand what is the right size for a new facility to be the next big pool in Garden City. So, recognizing the trends, Jeff, did you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, and I think hopefully the next slide kind of gets into some of the market analysis information. We'll see. So how we start to get to that point, Doug can tell you what the bather capacity is of that concept design, which is about 1,700. We start taking a look at the realities of the service area. This is where we interface with some of the data and statistics that we're talking about. And this is an illustration of how different ways that we can look at the service area. We can look at it just by defined boundaries. We can look at it by drive time, or we can just look at it from a radius perspective. It's interesting, you said you had 500,000 people in your trade area. You may want to look at that as being a service area. So once the service area is established, we not only take a look at the demographics, but we can start to overlay statistical analysis onto that demographic profile that starts to tell us a little bit about participation in various activities, and swimming happens to be on this chart. And in this example, this is all customized to your trade area. This is not, this is just an example, but we would take into account the median age, household income, region of the country, and national participation. We average those together to come up with participation rates. So then that participation rate, once we have that and understand that, now we can start taking that to another level. So we know from a swimming perspective that if it's 15.7% of your population that swims, 6.8% of that population is going to do so on a frequent basis, which means over 110 times a year. On an occasional basis, that's 40.5%. They're going to participate somewhere between 25 and 90. And so we've actually kind of did a correlation, said, all right, on an occasional, let's assume it's 60. So it was kind of in between that. And then the infrequent comes 6 to 24 times. 52.7%. So there is a way that we can start to take a look at your service area to get to this number. And so if you were to look at that calculation, that's for an annual basis, but I think, just as an example, that's going to be roughly for a summer season, that's going to be about 500 swimmers a day that we see. That's probably more realistic with what you're seeing. You're not seeing the 4,000, even though you got that capacity. So we can use some of that data and some of the statistical information to help frame this in terms of realistically what you're going to see.
So one of the next questions was, and I think, your current proposed design, what kind of water treatment options are you proposing? There's a lot of discussion on that. I mean, I know we're getting close to the time, so I won't go through, but we talk at World Aquatic Health Conference, all the different types of conferences, because we're known as world leaders in this type of information. But, so kind of a brief summary of that. What really helps to understand is we need to look at the turnover rates in the pool, how we're collecting the water, how we're distributing the water. Just like any HVAC design, you gotta distribute it correctly. One of the things we do, like in a zero depth entry pool, is where do you think the highest organic load is? It's at the zero depth entry with a lot of kids sitting there in diapers, right, or swim pants. And so we turn those over a lot faster than we would a 50-meter pool. And so it's really, we look at the turnover rates, because that's a very important part of it, because the faster the water turns over at the correct rate is how fast you can be able to accomplish, if there's organic things that are happening, or, different types of things. The other thing is how it skims, how it skims the water off the surface, because most water that is influenced by debris that comes into the surface of the water. If we can get rid of that, filter it out before it becomes down at the bottom, we're not going to have as much algae growth and things of that nature. So then we look at, okay, we've got to look at the turnover rates and how it's distributed. The other thing is the filter efficiencies. How efficiently are we removing particulate matter from the water? And so one of the things I noticed, you guys have sand filters. Sand filters start off at their filtration rate. You guys know what kind of sand, are you using sand, or are you using any kind of unusual media in that?
It's just sand,
Okay.
it's nothing special.
So sand starts out with a filtration ability of about 70 microns, and as you know, as it gets dirtier and dirtier, the porosity increases so you get down to maybe 35 microns. That's one way to do it. But a lot of facilities we're starting off at 2 microns of filtration. So we're getting much cleaner water, we're removing a lot of the particulate matter the first time. The other thing is, when you look at filter efficiencies, where's all the junk in the pool? In the filter, if it have good turnover rates. What are the things that we can backwash out is the, particulate matter, right? What are the things we'd like to get rid of? Any of the sludges, biofilms, those types of things. And that's one of the things that we need to look at, is if we're going to stay with sand or any other kind of medium, we want to make sure we're eliminating biofilms, because that's where actually the nitrogen trichloride start to build because of the catalyst effect there. So then we get into sanitation. What are the types of sanitation we want to have? Nobody goes to the pool and says, boy, I want to go home smelling like a chlorine bucket. They want to go to have a healthy user experience. They don't even want to know that there's chlorine in the water. And so one of the things that we're doing with different types of alternatives, we do have to have, by code and standards of the industry, we have to have a residual level that when you start looking at the circulation rate, we have a continuous area that has that level there. I would guess that your pool doesn't, if you went down to the bottom, your chlorine level is a little different than it is where your distribution system is. And so how do we sanitize that? With liquid chlorine and different things, so we don't have any algae buildup and things of that nature. So those are, then we also look at supplemental sanitation, things like UV. I see that you had that on your splash pad. UV and sometimes it's medium pressure, sometimes it's low pressure. Other things like we're looking at things that distribution of the particles. If we can get into nano distribution, you get much better efficiencies of chlorine and pH adjustments and things like that. But this is a really long, complicated process. And did you have any questions? I mean, I kind of skimmed it. Yes,
I have a question. When you speak about that at a conference, do people stay awake through the whole thing?
A lot
I
of
don't
times
go
it's
to those.
a lot of times it's it's scientific people, and it's people that operate facilities. They're anxious to learn.
But to answer your question, I've seen Doug present before he falls asleep.
One thing we're looking at though is the better we can filter the water, the less input we have to make in terms of chlorine as well.
Yeah.
So those are those are pretty big cost centers right now.
Yeah. And how often are you backwashing your filters currently?
That, I do not do that, so I don't know what they're doing on backwashing, but I know, you know, my impression is that the filter system is probably undersized for the volume of water that we have in that pool. And I know we have issues with our skimming ability.
Yeah, the gutters are unlevel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, all of these equal the answer. You know, I mean, and so we look at the turnover rates, how you distribute the water, how you collect the water, how, you know, and the water efficiency. One of the things that is really important is sand filters have to use pool water to backwash. Now, that's one of those, that's a huge drain on your pool. A lot of filters like that maybe haven't been cleaned that much over the years, you might be backwashing it 2 or 3 times a week. To backwash those filters, that's a lot of water that, you know, is probably adding to your potential loss. And so there's filters that could probably go almost throughout the season, maybe twice or, you know, once or twice a season, 2 or 3 times a season, and that would use significantly less water and capture more water, or capture more particulate matter. So those are the types of things with your input we'll understand. So basically, what's the life cycle of these systems? Well, there's consumable materials, such as like probes for like your chemistry controllers, you know, your pumps and motors and things like that, the mechanical equipment, that has a lifespan. Those motors won't last forever. You know, how long is a pump gonna last? Well, how well are you gonna take care of it? How are you gonna balance your water treatment? How are you gonna make sure we don't have cavitation going on so that it's chewing up impellers? All those types of things balance out the mechanical. The other thing is, then you look at the structures. You know, how long should a structure last? Well, I think you guys are a poster child of that. That structure, some of that structure's been in for almost 100 years. And so that shows you can have a long life structure if you take care of it well. And so understanding the geotechnical requirements of the soils and things like that will help us design a structure that has a lifespan from 60 to 100 years. And so, but there's gonna be some mechanical upgrades over time and some consumable materials that have to be figured into that. And so when we look at facilities, especially older facilities, you not only have the structural and the kind of the service life of it, but you have to look at the market life of it. You know, is something that we put in now, you know, for a feature, is that gonna be popular 60 years from now? Anybody know the answer to that question?
No.
Yeah, I don't. You know, I can guess it probably, there's certain things that will be, but there's certain things that won't be. So we need to look at, there will be some water attainment value that we need to increase. So one of the things, Jeff did a quick analysis on the design that we put in there. Is your question, what kind of staffing level will you need for this design we're showing you?
And what we came up with looking at that, it take about 12 lifeguards, and then of course we have to factor in down guards for that as well. So you might be up to, you know, 16 lifeguards with that concept in front of you.
So does your design take, you know, think about the sightlines? Absolutely. Every design we do thinks about the sightlines for users. Now, that we do have some facilities where they purposely ask us not to do that because they want to have big thematic elements in there. And so we talk through that, and that's the owner's decision, but we help guide them through that.
Hey, Doug, Jeff, can I back up to 12 to 16 based on this? How does that compare to, is that typical, is that high, is that low? Are there things that could be done to make this even more efficient from that standpoint, or is that a pretty reasonable number?
For the kind of features you have, that would be
Okay.
normal. You know what, some of the drivers in that, you know, water slides, and Doug talked about that, the water slides are popular. Again, there's pros and cons to that. How many times can you go down that water slide before it gets old? But anytime you're operating the water slide, you need 2 people. You need one up on top and you need one down below. So it is a cost, labor-intensive feature to have as well. So there may be some of that, and Doug made reference that they have other slide designs now that are running out that don't require you to have somebody for splashdown area, because there is no splashdown pool.
So when he said that, I have a question. So the way we operate our slides, so you say 12 to 16 lifeguards, like true lifeguards. So the way we operate our slides is we have lifeguards at the bottom for the safety aspect.
An attendant on top.
We just have an attendant on top, so they're not lifeguard trained or anything like that. So is that factored into those numbers, or are you counting?
No, at this point, I
Counted
counted that
lifeguards.
as,
Okay.
as a lifeguard.
Okay.
But,
Okay,
you know, and that's a big challenge. I suspect you're facing that here in Garden City, as well as we're seeing around the country. It's getting harder and harder to find lifeguards. And, you know, the season is getting shorter and shorter. You know, because if you're getting college students, good luck trying to get them in the middle of August, because they want a little time off before they go back to school. So we're finding a lot of facilities are closing in early August, sometimes not opening, having delayed openings just because it's a challenge. Are you facing some of that here too?
We have about 55 lifeguards. We need about 20 a day in order to open,
Yeah.
and so that's we've added a few to that 20 since we added the inflatable structure, because like you guys said, it's hard to see, and so having a lifeguard out on that structure and being able to see the center of it.
Yes.
So there's been a couple of things that have increased the number of guards that we have, but just the sight lines in that deep end and being able to see the shadows and the bodies, we just have way more guards in an area for safety purposes that no one's using to swim. And so that's something, so we're hiring a lot. We honestly have a lot of people who are interested. We have a lot of good kids who want to work there. And it's a really good seasonal job. We pay really well. So I think there's a lot of good things. It's just that managing that 55 when you need 20 a day does become hard at the end of the season, because I can get 12 or 15 there, but getting 20 there in the first 2 weeks of August becomes very difficult. Or even managing family vacations. 55 lifeguards, you think, oh, it wouldn't be a problem. Well, it's still a problem when every family takes their family vacation the third week of July. You're down to, this, and then people get upset because, well, what area of the pool do you choose to close? Even though there's only 3 people that want to use the deep end, if you close that, they're still upset. There's still 3 people who are upset that that's closed, because their expectation is I paid to come in and use the whole facility. So just managing that, I think, is something that I want to make sure that we take care of in this process.
And that's one of the neat things about that design is there's different zones, so you can control that and understand what are the appealing areas and manage it from a lifeguard perspective. Transparent design is something that we talk about all the time. That's really important. And when you start looking at big play structures like this with big dumping buckets, those are hugely appealing. They have a lot of people that can go onto those, but there's a lot of lifeguards that are needed for a facility like that. As opposed to kind of more of a transparent design where you can see through all the play structures and fun items. One of the things that we are doing a lot of, again, from this wave river we talked about in Brighton, you can see having those high walls increase the number of lifeguards because it decreased the visibility. So we talked through that with them, but having it nice and open, deep, like in Abilene, you can kind of see a lot easier. It increases that transparency. Again, having water slides that have runouts. Now you can have 2 water slides coming down to 2 runouts and have 1 attendant at the top. You don't need lifeguards because it's not deep water. Different types of activities. Again, this is showing a run out versus going into a plunge pool. And again, having a good understanding. It's really important when you design the slides that the attendant up here can see where the discharge is from the water slide. So it's easy to see as opposed to having to. So again, this is a facility that kind of illustrates transparent design. There's a lot of things going on. There's a big play structure. There's a big slide complex. You can't see the slides. Actually, this picture's taken from the slides. They go into runouts. But you can see we've really maximized the ability for transparency. You can see there's a few people that are enjoying that facility. And again, this lap pool is a pool that was designed so that it could be used year round. This is in Kentucky, that they were looking at different types of structures. So you propose that what should the city plan to budget for operational expenses?
And I'll just talk quick, Glenn. I mean, there's key components. The biggest, of course, is staffing, without question. So we will look at, what we would do is once we have a plan design, we would sit down with you and actually develop a schedule. We have a tendency to focus on hours of coverage more than staff, because as you know, you got some staff that might be working 30 hours a week and other staff that might be working 10 hours a week. So it's all over the board, but that's first and foremost is setting that staffing schedule. So all of that would roll into to the expenses. We want to make sure, of course, we have all the line items accounted for. And one excuse me, one line item that we are always encouraging our clients to do, and that is to look at including capital replacement in your operating budget. Again, in a municipal environment, you typically end up, your capital, you're competing with everything else that you need in your community. And so if it's time to try to enhance a facility, or they need new police cars, what's gonna happen? So you know, Park and Recreation has a tendency to get deferred. So we recommend strongly that you're proactive and create a capital replacement fund right from year one, that you're putting money aside. It builds, so when it's time to perhaps change out one of your water features to get something new and fresh, you have a source for doing that, so you're not competing with everything else that's going on in the community. So we feel pretty strongly about that. The other aspect that I want to mention is concessions. We'll talk a lot about concessions, and you know that because we believe that can be a profit center, but it can be a profit center if you're operating like a business and not a service. If you're operating as a service, you're probably losing money on that. So there's some formulas that are very important as we look at that. So all that detail is rolled up into the operating budget on the expense side, and we're certainly taking a look at all the revenues, the revenue sources that you get, from birthday parties to rentals to learn to swim classes, all of those different revenue levels. It essentially is building a line item budget is what we do, but we do that very transparently. We do it with you as a client because we recognize you have to have an understanding of that operating budget, and you have to, because you're the ones that are going to have to be defending that as you move forward. Right, so you need to understand that, be able to answer the questions, and make sure it works in your environment.
We are just about to the finish line here. So what ideas do you have to incorporate the history and iconic status of our current facility in the new design? So when we talk about theming, storytelling in any of our work, you know, right now, I wouldn't say we have an idea or ideas. It's part of a conversation we need to have. And we'll ask a series of questions. A few of those are, you know, for you or participants, how do you describe Garden City when you're away? What places or events do you tell people they have to see when they're here? Why do you live here? That's a big one. What keeps you here? Or, for some people, why did you move away and what brought you back? How do you want to be perceived as a community? So that point of, wow, you have to go see this, see what Garden City did. How do you want, oh, that's on there twice. We're gonna ask you twice. Not want to be
Not
perceived.
want to be perceived.
So we'll ask those questions, but really what we're trying to get to is what is the story of Garden City? Or what is the story of the big pool, or whatever that might be. So I've got a few examples of, this is a children's zoo up in Lincoln, Nebraska, knowing that we're right across the street from the zoo. Just thought it was interesting, you know, is there some synergy there in Finna Park and the story of how the park came to be, and that can kind of make its way throughout the zoo as well as aquatics, to make it more than just the big pool. Some interesting things to do that can be, and I want to go back to that trying to integrate it more and not just have it only be signage or storytelling options like that. You know, when you theme aquatics, you know, it's real easy to say, hey, we want to have the big beach or the big surf, you know, surf shack or whatever that theme might be. Well, we want to, that's not so unique. Is that what Garden City wants? That might be an option. But another way to look at it is, what is the story of Garden City? What, I mentioned authenticity. What can we do to make it unique for this place? Oftentimes, we will just ask people to tell us stories. So at a public meeting, we may just have a station where we have people tell us what you remember about the big pool. What are some of the stories you remember about the park? Or what are some of your favorite memories growing up as a kid? What we find from that is there are a lot of things people know that the rest of us who are working with this day to day have never experienced or know. And that gives us an avenue to dig in and research. There are history buffs in every community that we can say, hey, did you ever hear this? And that can lead us into some unique thing that, you know, people that come in 10 years from now may have never heard of otherwise. And so there's some unique stories that we can find just through anecdote. And trying not to be too, I don't know, maybe technically historical or not worry about the history of the architecture or things like that, but the story of the place is really what we're after. This is an exhibit we did up at the Kansas City Zoo. Billy Goat's Gruff was the theme. They wanted a goat exhibit. So we're telling a story, and we're engaging the kids in a story they may be familiar with. But what's interesting about it is the signage, the storytelling opportunities, you know, it's not just applied, it's woven throughout. And the whole thing is themed. Well, we've got an interpretive planner in-house in our staff. And so she's developing all of these. So as we're having these discussions with the community, you know, she's hearing them and she's thinking about how can I tell that story in an engaging way. It's more than just, you know, timelines and things. This is an example where we did use signage. We did it a little bit both. So this is actually a streetscape project, but it's a public improvement project. So we're trying to find things that may otherwise be mundane, utility boxes. So there's a way to tell stories there and make them less of an eyesore. There are some equipment features around facilities like this. This whole panel, this whole series of panels came out of some of those stories that the community told us. Things we learned which are kind of interesting is wishbone salad dressing started on Main Street, H&R Block started on Main Street. There are so many things that happened that we found out from just having people write things on a Post-it note at the beginning of the process. So for us, the story about the iconic nature of the big pool is going to come from conversations we had with your community. I can't pretend to come in and tell you what that story is today. So this was a question. So on our sheet, on our estimate when we submitted that, we excluded demolition and utilities. Partly, well not partly, because utility costs, not knowing if we're going to get into any kind of significant utility replacement costs as we're refreshing, rebuilding, whatever it might be. It's an unknown for us at this point. From a demolition standpoint, there's a lot of different things that could go into that. One, are we tearing out the whole thing or not? That concept assumes that. But even in that case, you know, is it something that we're going to be demolishing and hauling off? How far do we have to haul away? Those are things we'll learn more about when we get on the ground here. Or another option, do we set up an on-site mill and crush it up and use it for backfill? How much of that material could actually be utilized for backfill? How does that interface with the soils? So there's a lot of geotech investigation that needs to go into that. So it's hard to really say what the cost is. Wouldn't be surprised if for something of this size, even if you left the building alone, you could still run, you know, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 just to get the site cleaned and prepped and ready to rebuild. But it's a big variable. So at this point, we were just not comfortable putting a number on that yet. So this is about the end here. So what important question do you believe we should be asking that we haven't asked yet? So there's a series of them. How could this be scalable? So oftentimes we get that question, well, what if we can't afford to do it all day one? I think we've shown you some examples of different components, different projects that have been built. The one in Abilene, I think, was the one that first phase has been built, but they've got a plan for future. I look at the one in Abilene and I think, you know what, if you sort of restrict yourselves to we can only build a $5 or $6 million facility, that might be tough to make that statement that you're talking about, that 30 years from now somebody looks back and says, look what we did. But if the master plan is something that the 5 or 6 million is only a component, then in 30 years or so, somebody will go back and say, wow, look at how they did that, and look at how well they did it and managed it. What trends maximize participation? I'm going to throw that at you.
Yeah, what trends, you know, so we really want to look at what are the things that are important to today's consumer. It's different than when that pool was built. And so, you know, but there's some similarity. We observed yesterday, you know, I would say half of the pool, when we first got there in the morning, they were just throwing a football. One person was standing on the deck throwing a football into the pool, and everybody was participating. So how do we use things like that to make it fun and exciting? And what are the things? Friendly competition, you know, friendly, those types of things, having healthful experiences, learning to swim, all those things maximize that participation. We want to reveal those trends to you guys in the community so that helps build the news story for the community.
And I think, you know, what's next? How does this stay relevant? We've chatted about those. I don't know if there's any more to add, Doug, but I think we've hit those pretty well. And then finally, how is it funded? So that question, you know, we always get on these community projects. What's your success rate been on helping communities, you know, have a successful referendum? You know, how can you help us kind of strategize, come up with a funding strategy? So, you know, that's part of, we've done a lot of these projects collectively. We can help your staff, city management, finance, kind of think through, you know, once we have a better understanding of funding stream, if there is a stream or not, then we can help you sort of discuss how you might phase it, if it needs to be phased. How does that align with funding availability and so forth? Or what is bonding capacity if that's a route? So those things, we've got a lot of experience, and we can kind of share with you how we've seen other communities be successful, and lessons learned from those that haven't been.
What other partnerships can be formed? You know, is Holcomb a partnership that, you know, helps do something? You know, there's a lot of, you know, the hospitals, you know, other things in town. So
one question that's not on here that I thought of, Jeff, while you were talking about revenue, I would be curious if I'm on that side of the table, knowing that we have a very modest fee, what, $2, something like that now, or no dollars?
It's $2.
$2 set. How do we keep from alienating people? How do we devise a fee structure that is financially smart, but also something that respects, you know, folks' situation in the community?
You know, I don't want to get too deep into it, but it probably starts to speak to an overlying fee policy. I don't know if you've got one in place, but it gets back to, from a elected official's perspective, what is the philosophy? What's the acceptable cost recovery rates, those types of things. So we start very big picture with that, and so what kind of fee structure is going to be needed to support that philosophy or to support that recovery rate?
Well, right now, concessions and admissions together create about $91,000 in revenue, and we spend between $700,000 and $800,000 total on capital and operations.
Yeah.
People, chemicals, water. Whatever.
So is your elected body comfortable with that, or you?
Well, they've been doing it for 100 years, so.
I understand it, but I would guess that it's not to that level.
I think, yeah, it actually has been.
Okay.
When you
So it
look
has
back, I did some research, you know, back to the early 80s, and that has pretty much been the scenario. In fact, it was worse because it used to be a free facility. And so prior to, I think somebody said 15 years ago, it was free. And so at that time, of that $91,000 in revenue, about 63 of that would have been gone. But the expense was still there. I mean, there was a time that the pool was losing upwards of 400,000 gallons of water. But that was probably also at a time that we weren't using as much chemical. And so that expense wasn't there. So there's been kind of this give and take.
Sure.
But over the last 97 years, for the most part, this practice has been accepted. Now, moving forward, and the reason we're having this conversation, I think, is because not only is this going to become more challenging, our commission just had a discussion last week about trying to keep the mill down and where that lands and how that falls, and we're under a tax lid, so we can only, you know, go up so much every single year, and we never know where that's going to be or what that's going to look like. And at the end of the day, you don't want to give up a necessary service for a recreation service. But if we don't answer this question, I think the fear is that we're going to lose a recreation service altogether. Because at some point, someone's gonna have to make that decision.
Which could happen. I mean, it is, I'm just giving you, from working all over the country, I mean, that's amazing that your governmental entity is just accepted that as the norm, that it's costing cities $600,000 to $700,000 a year, top rate your aquatic component. That we don't typically see in a lot of communities.
I don't think they ever had a choice. I think that they feel like they are representatives of this community,
Yeah.
and that is what this community expected of them and expected no less. Like you said, this is an icon,
Yeah.
this is something
But
that
at the
people
same
love.
time, you've got to balance that with, I mean, your mill levy that you have, the tax level that you have, only generates X dollars.
Right.
And then you've got all the other city services that are competing.
Yeah.
At some point, somebody's gonna say,
Yes,
wait a minute.
absolutely.
We can't hire another police officer because we're spending $600,000 a year subsidizing the pool
Yeah.
operation.
And I think the water loss, that discussion, because of how important that resource is and how much more aware people are becoming of you know, where we could be or where we could end up, and just the city overall, you know, when Fred was hired in 2013, you know, his job was to go around and find ways for us to conserve water in everything we did. And so I think if we're gonna have that conversation about a park or about the golf course or whatever it may be, you know, how can you not have that about the big pool?
Right.
So,
Yeah. Generally speaking, again, you get that, once you identify what the goals are, then it's a matter of establishing a fee structure to reach that goal.
I think on our end, because this is so new, and I've worked in other cities and agencies, that bringing probably some information about how other cities, what their subsidy rate is on aquatic facilities, because most of them are subsidized. Just having that kind of information to
Yeah,
give
doing
some
like a
guidance.
benchmark survey of other comparable
Yep.
Yeah.
cities and facilities, absolutely,
Because I don't know that you'll ever get away from it with an outdoor pool.
yeah.
Yep.
So one of the questions was how many, we're losing 200,000 gallons. What if we didn't have a leak? What would we expect our usage to be? 12 to 14,000 gallons a day. That would be evaporation and splash out
For a pool of this size.
for your existing pool. And
In
so-
this location.
In this location, all things considered, you know, this is normal evaporation and splash out. And then again, that number is just, that's kind of what it's cost to operate it. Now, with sand filters, you're gonna use, that number's gonna go up, you know, significantly. If you use like a regenerative media filter, that number's gonna be real close to that.
Was that an industry number, or is that
That's a
something you just have experienced?
So we calculated it for this pool, looked at the humidity levels and, you know, what we could find in terms of the user rates, and that's what we developed.
Thank you.
thank you, appreciate that.
So, how many have been designed and built? We've shown more than we could keep track of. Thousands designed, millions of people benefited from those designs throughout the world. Timing, outdoor facility might take 6 to 9 months, still somewhat variable on what all's included. Indoor facility could have an even broader range depending upon, you know, conventional construction, more temporary construction, and what all's included. Yes?
So I think this is something that we need you to explain, just for the purposes of our commission, because they are going to look at this issue next week on July 16th. And so there's some other things that have to happen, after that, even if, so we show up on July 16th, if they say, yes, we're ready to move forward, and yes, we're gonna go with this group, there's then some things that have to happen after that before we actually get to the point of demolition and construction.
Oh, yeah,
But
definitely.
the question I keep getting asked from people, and I think this is the question that the commission is going to heavily consider, is if they move rapidly, if they move just as quickly as they can with having 2 meetings a month, you know, where they can make decisions and that sort of thing, is it possible to close this season and open in a 2020 season, even if it was, okay, well, we normally open on May 25th, but we're not gonna be able to open until June 15th, or whatever it may be. Is there a scenario where you start to finish in that period of time?
So I'll start and I'll say, and because I was expecting this question that wasn't asked. So you're asking, could you shut down Labor Day or after the season 2019 and be ready to go by, no.
Okay.
We don't, I mean, we won't even, we might have a contract in place by the end of July, but we're just gonna be doing preliminary design and just doing feasibility analysis and not even starting real, quote, real design. And so by the end of this year, we're just trying to get through this preliminary phase of what is the right thing to do. And then we've got another 6 to 9 months of design just to, based on whatever that is. And then in there somewhere, we're determining, well, are we gonna do CM at risk? What are we're gonna do design, bid, build, whatever. So there's, 6 to 9 months is being accelerated,
Okay.
even from January 1 on. So, and as I was looking at this yesterday, I thought, there's a couple things that you might do, and I get it that we wanna do it as quick as possible, but as quick as makes sense is
Sure,
probably a better
absolutely.
way. And I think there's some interesting things going on here that might help build the schedule backward. The 100th birthday of the park in 22, I believe is when it turns 100, if I remember right.
Yep.
So if you backed off from May of 2022, you would be, back off, what are we saying here? Let's say a year, for construction. So let's say after this 2020 season, you shut it down, you take that year to build a new outdoor facility. Or maybe we go through the design in the kind of 20, we wrap up late 20, we start procurement and construction in 21. You build it, you have this awesome celebration in May of 2022, you celebrate the last 100 years, and you celebrate the next 100 years. So I think in addition to just what's the best time to build it, I think there are some things, because of the sentimental attachment that we're hearing just in the limited exposure we've had to this, there may be some reasons to think about when's the right time to open it, or when's the right way to go about it. And so, seems silly, but taking the time to let people kind of have closure,
Sure.
rather than, we're gonna shut it down after this year and move on. Some people won't even have had a chance to, quote, say goodbye yet.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the commission's concern, or part of their thought process, although I think the bigger concern or the bigger thought process that they have and that they're gonna take into consideration is, are we gonna have to go a full season at some point without water recreation service? And for them, I think that's gonna be a hard
Right.
one to swallow.
And we did talk about that, and Doug, I'll speak and you can shut me up, but we did feel like if you're building an outdoor facility, you could do it between seasons in this location.
Yeah, you could, so basically, but that, again, it's a pretty accelerated schedule
Yeah.
because
Right.
there's a legacy in town that we're gonna have to deal with getting the public to support this
Right.
concept.
Yeah.
And so that's gonna take some time, but
Sure.
if going through this process, we start building those advocates and information in education in the community, the ideal situation is by 2020, the fall of
Yeah.
20, Labor Day 2020, we've already gone through all the design process, we've got a contractor on board, Labor Day hits,
Permits. Yeah.
and the permits are done and all that kind of stuff, everything's ready to go. We could, again, what's the weather gonna be like in 2020? Again,
Well,
looking
we
at
did
my-
have a bad winter this last winter, so
Yeah.
maybe we're safe for a little
We're
while.
all hoping for
Yeah,
that.
but so then we could be open by 2021.
Right.
But again, that depends what it is that we're actually doing, and there is a process that really has to go.
Yeah, I think realistically, 2020, starting after the 2020 season is realistic, but we would ask the question, what's your permit review time like? Obviously, it's not like a lot of the
Sure.
bigger cities we work in, but it is about who's gonna be dedicated to this to help shepherd it through the permitting process and so forth.
I think it's important for the commission to understand that, because one of the questions that they're going to have to answer at this next meeting is, big pool, yes or no, 2020. And that question is separate from what do we do with future water recreation? But that question has to be answered so that we as a staff can figure out what things have to be fixed in order to operate another season. And so those are, you know, and how much more water, how much more expense are we willing to put out there, or does that need to move into another project, and do we need to move as quickly as possible? So those are the things that they need to understand to be able to make those decisions.
Yeah, I don't think I could stand here today and say you could have a new pool in place by spring of 2020.
Okay.
But there is a way to spend a little money and get rid of, I mean, do you guys know where the leaks are? You know, so I think doing a little investigative work could identify where those leaks are, and let's resolve that $200,000 or 200,000 gallon per day loss, especially if we gap we know this is a temporary fix, we can talk to the health department officials, get that approved as a stopgap measure, and get that resolved.
They're not true leaks, so it's not like we have a hole. We've had a lot of issues like that have been repaired. The deep end has been in several spots dug up, new piping laid, all of that, but none of it actually really resolved any of the water going out of the pool. Small percentages, very small percentages. The deck, if you were there yesterday, the deck is on level from one side to the other. The renovations that would need to be done in a capital cost in order to truly stop the water from leaking is probably the money that would have to be spent to take it out and build something new, or take it out and do this. This is not a small, I mean, to go and fix even have a conversation. I don't even know that there's a true conversation that you can have about fixing. I don't think fixing is a good word to use, because that's not something that we are capable of doing, or that anyone who has looked at this, from engineer to whoever, that has said, yes, we can fix this. Because the response has always been, no, we can't fix this. We can investigate, we can maybe do something and see what happens, and that's what's always been done, but it's never resolved the issue. And so I think to do that in a year where you have no idea whether or not it's gonna have any impact, and then say, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna spend, I think the community would be outraged by that. I think they wouldn't be very happy with that solution.
Okay.
The other issue is the more water you retain in that pool, the more you're gonna exacerbate the pool's inability to treat the water.
Right.
So you'll repair one problem and you'll create a water quality issue on the back end, because if you retain the water in there longer,
Because at least you
then
got 200,000
you're gonna continue to grow more algae,
Thank you.
more bacteria, things like that. So it's unfortunate that it's losing that kind of water. But on the other hand, it's probably one of the things that's keeping
hidden
it
benefit.
swimmable. So
Yeah.
that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I think what we're experiencing right now is the fact that everything has a lifespan. Doesn't matter, sometimes that can be 20 years, it can be 100 years.
Right.
The thing is so old, we're literally probably past its
Useful.
real lifespan.
Mhm.
The
And,
veracity of the company.
and so in order to fix it, you're gonna have to tear it out and redo
Yeah.
it anyways.
It won't survive the surgery.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you've got burning questions
Somebody's
or
gotta
thoughts?
go.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I have Alan waiting for me.
That's okay.
I
That's okay.
told him I had
Otherwise,
Alan
we are-
in between.
No, you're fine.
We've got one more slide to wrap up, but I wanted to get, if there's anything else we haven't touched on.
Does anybody have any specific questions
Thank
that they
you.
wanna ask?
Thank you.
That they
Yes,
feel
thank
like they haven't answered?
No.
No.
Okay.
He's got a gotcha, he's just waiting.
Then go ahead.
Great, so the last question is, why should we pick your firm to move forward? And whatever we decide to do. So, as I mentioned at the first, or to start outset of this, we've built the team that, as Doug mentioned, Jen, Jeff, Dave, all across the country, even internationally, we've worked together multiple times successfully on repeat projects. Repeat clients have called this team back, which I think is a, something to be proud of. We have creative solutions that are driven by data, as Jeff said. Whatever this community aspires to, we want to help you achieve that, but we want to ground that in reality and in real facts. So the data is important to us. Proven track record of successful collaborations. I think we've shown you examples of that. unmatched aquatics and parks expertise throughout the region. There really is no other team that has this type of expertise. We've partnered with a lot of other architects, aquatics consultants. We partner with others that are in recreation planning and management side of things. There is no one else that we would team with on this project. This is the team, and we've got your bases covered. We've got everybody here that can help you make those decisions up front. The only thing that I would say we want to add, and we did this intentionally, is once you sign our contract, once you select us, we want to find a civil engineer who's local or at least regional, because those are the folks that are going to understand site conditions, soil conditions, all those things that they know about and they deal with. We would rather just find that person once we're on the ground here, or have you help us find the right fit. We've got some folks that we could, maybe bring in from Wichita, but I'm sure there are others that we could find locally. So that's somebody I know we'd want to add early on. With that, really appreciate the time. This has been one of the longest interviews I've done in about 2 years, probably. I hope we weren't boring, but it's been good. We've enjoyed the conversation. We love the opportunity, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.